Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Martha Blackburn, but everyone calls me Marty. I've been a ranger in these Kentucky hills for 14 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything the Daniel Boone National Forest could throw at me. Bears, lost hikers, illegal campers, even a few drug labs hidden in the caves. But I never thought I'd have to deal with the dead. I grew up in these mountains, in a little mining town that's mostly gone now. My daddy worked the coal mines, just like his daddy before him. It was hard work, dangerous work, but it put food on the table. I had 3 brothers, Billy, Tommy, and Jimmy. Jimmy was the youngest, just 8 years old when the mine exploded in 1952. I was 12 then, old enough to understand what happened, but too young to do anything about it. The mine company said it was an accident, a gas pocket they didn't know about. But the truth was, they knew. They always knew. They just didn't care enough to fix it. 47 people died that day. Most of them were miners, but some were kids who'd come to visit their daddies at work. Jimmy was one of them. They never found all the bodies. The mine flooded right after the explosion, and the company sealed it up quick as they could, said it was too dangerous to keep looking. That's why I became a ranger. I told myself it was to protect people, to make sure families didn't lose what I lost. But deep down, I think I just wanted to stay close to where Jimmy died. Like maybe if I watched over these hills long enough, I could somehow watch over him too. Hell Hollow got its name long before the mine explosion. It's a deep valley between 2 ridges, thick with pine trees and always cold, even in summer. The old-timers said it was cursed land, that nothing good would ever come from digging in those hills. Turns out they were right. The abandoned mine sits at the bottom of the hollow, its entrance boarded up with steel, plates and warning signs. You can still see the old company buildings all falling apart now. Weeds grow through the floors and the roofs have holes big enough for birds to nest in. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, you can still smell the coal dust in the air. I never liked coming to Hell Hollow, even for work. It felt wrong somehow, like the whole place was holding its breath. The animals avoided it too. You'd see plenty of deer and rabbits on the trails leading in, but once you got close to the old mine, everything went quiet. Even the birds stopped singing. That should have been my first warning. The reports started coming in about 3 weeks ago. Hikers said they saw kids playing near the old mine buildings. Kids in old-fashioned clothes, the kind you'd see in pictures from the 1950s. The hikers would try to get closer, worried about children being in such a dangerous place, but the kids would vanish the moment they looked away. Most people figured it was just shadows and imagination. Hell Hollow had that effect on folks, made them see things that weren't there. But the reports kept coming, and they were all the same. Children laughing and playing, then disappearing like smoke. My partner, Kevin Mullins, thought it was all nonsense. Kevin's been a ranger for 6 years, and he doesn't believe in anything he can't put in a report. It's just hikers spooked by an old story, he'd say. Place like Hell Hollow, people expect to see ghosts, so they do. Maybe he was right. Maybe I wanted to believe it was something more because of Jimmy. But when Mrs. Henderson came to the ranger station last Tuesday, I knew we had to investigate. Mrs. Henderson was 83 years old and sharp as a tack. Her husband died in the mine explosion, and she'd lived in these hills her whole life. She didn't scare easy, and she didn't make things up. "Marty," she said, gripping, my hand with fingers like bird bones. "I saw my Bobby yesterday, my little Bobby playing by the mine entrance just like he used to. He waved at me, sweet as life, then walked right through that steel door like it wasn't even there." Her Bobby had been 9 years old when he died, just like Jimmy. "Mrs. Henderson," I said gently, "you know that's not possible." 14 years you've been watching over these hills," she said, her old eyes staring right through me. "But you've never really looked, have you? There's more than one way to be lost in these woods, child. And sometimes the lost ones need finding." That's when Kevin and I decided to spend a night in Hell Hollow. Just to prove there was nothing there, Kevin said. Just to put the old stories to rest. We should have listened to the stories instead. Kevin and I packed our gear that Friday afternoon. Flashlights, radios, first aid kit, sleeping bags, standard overnight patrol equipment. We drove down the old mining road as far as we could, then hiked the last mile into Hell Hollow on foot. The temperature dropped the moment we stepped off the main trail. It was July in Kentucky, hot and sticky everywhere else, but here the air felt like October. Our breath came out in little puffs, and I zipped up my jacket. "That's weird," Kevin said, checking his thermometer. "It's 40 degrees colder here than it was on the road." "Hollow creates its own weather," I told him. "Cold air sinks, gets trapped between the ridges." But I'd never felt it this cold before, not even in winter. We set up camp about 100 yards from the old mine entrance, close enough to watch but far enough to feel safe. The sun was setting behind the western ridge, throwing long shadows across the hollow. Everything looked normal, just old buildings and rusted equipment, slowly being taken back by the forest. "So what exactly are we watching for?" Kevin asked, stirring beans over our camp stove. "Kids playing where they shouldn't be," I said. "Voices, movement, anything that doesn't belong." "And if we see something?" We fight. Gear out what it really is. We ate our dinner as darkness settled over the hollow. The silence was complete. No crickets, no night birds, no rustling in the bushes. Even our own voices seemed muffled, like the air itself was swallowing the sound. Around 10 o'clock, Kevin dozed off in his sleeping bag. I stayed awake, watching the mine entrance through my binoculars. The steel door was solid black against the lighter stone, held shut with chains and padlocks that hadn't been opened in decades. That's when I heard the first laugh. It was soft and far away, like an echo of an echo. A child's laugh, high and sweet. I sat up straight, scanning the area with my flashlight. Nothing, just empty buildings and shadows. "Kevin," I whispered, shaking his shoulder. "What?" He sat up, instantly alert. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" We listened together in the dark. Silence. "Must have been an owl," Kevin said, lying back down. "They can sound like kids sometimes." But I knew what an owl sounded like. This was something else. 20 minutes later, I heard it again. This time it was closer, and there were more voices. Children laughing and calling to each other like they were playing hide and seek in the dark. I counted at least 4 different voices, maybe 5. "Kevin!" I grabbed his arm hard enough to hurt. This time he heard it too. We both sat frozen, listening to the sound of children playing where no children should be. The voices seemed to come from all around us, from the mine buildings, from the trees, even from underground. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. "What the hell was that?" Kevin whispered. I was already on my feet, flashlight in hand. "I don't know, but we're going to find out." We approached the mine entrance carefully, our lights cutting through the darkness. The steel door looked the same as always, rusted, chained, untouched. But there was something different about the ground around it. "Marty," Kevin called, his voice strange. "Look at this." He was kneeling beside the door, shining his light on the dirt. There, clear as anything, were small footprints. Child-sized prints in the mud, leading right up to the steel barrier. "That's impossible," I said. "It hasn't rained in a week. This mud should be bone dry." Kevin touched the ground with his finger. It came away wet and dark. "It's fresh. And look here." He moved his light to the right. More prints, leading away from the mine toward the old company office. We followed them, our hearts pounding. The prints were clear and sharp, made by small feet in old-fashioned shoes, the kind kids wore in the 1950s. The trail led us to the office building, then around to the back where a rusty swing set still stood. It had been there since the mining days, a place for workers' kids to play while their fathers were underground. Now it was just twisted metal and broken chains, the seats long since rotted away. But as we watched, one of the chains began to move. It swayed back and forth like an invisible child was pushing it. There was no wind in the hollow, nothing that could make it move. But it kept swinging, the rusty links creaking in the silence. Jesus, Kevin breathed. That's when I saw him. At first it was just a flicker in my peripheral vision, a movement that might have been a shadow. But when I turned my flashlight toward it, the beam passed right through the shape of a small boy. He was maybe 8 years old, dressed in a plaid shirt and overalls. His hair was sandy brown, cut short the way boys wore it back then. He stood perfectly still beside the swing set, looking directly at me with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. I knew that face. I'd seen it in family photos, in my dreams, in the mirror when I was young and looked just like him. "Jimmy?" I whispered. The boy smiled, that same crooked grin Jimmy had when he was being mischievous. He raised his hand and waved at me, then pointed toward the mine entrance. And his mouth moved like he was trying to tell me something, but I couldn't hear the words. "Marty!" Kevin grabbed my arm. "Marty, what are you looking at?" "You don't see him?" "See who? There's nobody there." I looked again, but the boy was gone. The swing chain had stopped moving. The footprints in the mud were already starting to fade, like they'd never been there at all. We spent the rest of the night huddled by our campfire, jumping at every sound. Neither of us slept. When dawn finally came, we packed up our gear and hiked back to the truck without talking about what we'd seen. But I couldn't stop thinking about Jimmy's face, about the way he'd pointed toward the mine. He was trying to tell me something. After all these years, he was trying to warn me. The question was, warn me about what? I couldn't let it go. Kevin wanted to file a report about unusual atmospheric conditions and leave it at that, but I knew we had to go back. There were answers in Hell Hollow, and I wasn't leaving without them. "This is crazy, Marty," Kevin said when I told him my plan. "Even if what we saw was real, and I'm not saying it was, what good can come from stirring it up? Those children died because adults didn't protect them," I said. "Maybe they're trying to protect someone now." I spent the next week researching the mine explosion, digging through old newspapers and county records. What I found made my blood run cold. The Appalachian Coal Company knew about the gas pockets. They'd had 3 smaller explosions in the months leading up to the big one, but they kept the mine open because shutting down would cost them money. 47 people died because of corporate greed, and most of those bodies were still down there in the flooded tunnels, never given a proper burial. The hikers kept coming to the ranger station with stories. A family from Ohio saw children playing Ring R2, Own the Rosie near the mine entrance, singing that old song about all falling down. A group of college kids camping nearby heard voices calling for help from inside the sealed mine shaft. Then Mrs. Patterson called. She was the widow of one of the miners, and she lived alone in a cabin about 2 miles from Hell Hollow. At 90 years old, she was the last person who'd actually known the children who died. "They've been visiting me," she said when I arrived at her cabin. "Every night this week, standing at my window. My little grandson Eddie and the Thompson boy and the preacher's son. They look exactly like they did the day they died." She showed me to her bedroom window. The glass was covered with small handprints, dozens of them, all pressed against the outside like children trying to get in. "What do they want?" I asked. "They want people to know the truth," she said. "They want people to remember. And they want to keep others safe." That night, Kevin and I returned to Hell Hollow with better equipment. Digital cameras, audio recorders, even a thermal imaging camera I'd borrowed from the state office. If something was happening here, we were going to document it. We set up our gear around the mine entrance and waited. The temperature drop happened again, even more extreme this time. Ice crystals formed on our equipment, and our breath came out in thick white clouds. The children appeared at midnight. This time, Kevin saw them too. They came out of the mine entrance like they were walking through water instead of steel, about a dozen kids ranging from maybe 6 to 12 years old. Some I recognized from old photographs. Jimmy was there, and Mrs. Patterson's grandson Eddie, and several others I'd seen in newspaper clippings from the funeral services. They moved through the hollow like they owned it, playing games and chasing each other around the old buildings. But they weren't playing for fun. They were working, organizing themselves like little sentries. Some climbed up on the roofs of buildings to keep watch. Others walked the perimeter of the cell, mine area, checking for something. "They're guarding it," Kevin whispered. But guarding it from what? That's when we heard the truck. It was coming down the old mining road, its headlights bouncing through the trees. The moment the children heard it, they stopped playing and turned toward the sound. Their faces changed, becoming serious and determined. The truck pulled up near the mine entrance, and 3 men got out. They were wearing hard hats and carrying surveying equipment. Even from a distance, I could see the company logo on their jackets. Appalachian Mining Solutions, the corporation that had bought the rights to Hell Hollow 6 months ago. "What are they doing here at midnight?" Kevin muttered. The men started setting up their equipment near the mine entrance, talking in low voices about preliminary surveys and structural integrity. They were planning to reopen the mine. The children didn't like that at all. It started small, a rock rolling down the hillside, almost hitting one of the surveyors. Then their equipment started malfunctioning. Theodolites spun wildly, measuring tools gave impossible readings, and flashlights flickered on and off. "This equipment is junk," one of the men complained. "Nothing's working right." That's when Jimmy walked right up to them. The man holding the theodolite suddenly went rigid, his face turning white. He was staring straight ahead, but his eyes had rolled back in his head like he was having a seizure. When he spoke, it wasn't his voice anymore. "Get out," he said in a child's voice. Jimmy's voice. "Don't dig here. Don't wake us up." The other 2 men backed away from their possessed colleague, but they couldn't run. Their feet seemed stuck to the ground, like the earth itself was holding them. More children appeared, surrounding the surveyors. Eddie Patterson picked up a heavy piece of mining equipment and threw it 10 feet through the air. The Thompson boy made the truck's engine start and stop, until black smoke poured from under the hood. The surveyor Jimmy was possessing started, convulsing, his body jerking like a puppet on strings. 47 died, he said, his voice getting louder and more desperate. 47! Don't make more! Don't let it happen again! Finally, the possession broke. The man collapsed, gasping and shaking. His partners grabbed him under the arms and dragged him toward their smoking truck. They threw their equipment in the back and drove off as fast as they could, leaving tire tracks and scattered papers behind. The children watched them go, then turned to look directly at Kevin and me. Jimmy smiled and waved again, but this time I could hear his voice clearly. "Help us, Marty," he said. "Help us keep them safe." Then all the children walked back into the mine, passing through the steel barrier like it was made of mist. Kevin was shaking, his face pale in the moonlight. "Did you see that? Did you record that?" I checked our equipment. Every camera, every recorder, every piece of electronic gear we'd brought, all of it was dead. Not just dead, but destroyed. The circuits had been fried by some kind of electromagnetic pulse. They don't want to be documented, I realized. They just want to be heard. The mining company came back 3 days later with a full crew and heavy equipment. They'd gotten permits from the state, permissions from the county, and enough lawyers to fight any legal challenges. Appalachian Mining Solutions was going to reopen Hell Hollow, whether anyone liked it or not. I tried to warn them. Kevin and I went to their site office and told the foreman about the strange incidents, the temperature changes, the electromagnetic interference. He laughed us out of the trailer. "You expect me to shut down a $1 million operation because of ghost stories?" he said. "Lady, I've been mining coal for 30 years. The only thing dangerous about old mines is the people who spread superstitions about them. Thesis." At night, the children fought back. It started with equipment failures. Bulldozers wouldn't start. Drill bits snapped for no reason, and survey stakes kept disappearing. Then things got more dramatic. A crane tipped over in broad daylight on level ground. A dump truck's brakes failed, sending it rolling into a creek. Nobody was hurt, but the message was clear. Leave this place alone. The mining company brought in security guards and motion detectors. They set up floodlights around the whole area and installed cameras every 50 feet. They were going to light up Hell Hollow like a football stadium and keep watch around the clock. The children adapted. They learned to avoid the cameras, staying just out of range or moving too fast to be caught on film. They figured out how to trigger the motion detectors in patterns, setting off dozens of false alarms until the guards stopped responding. And they started getting more aggressive. Kevin and I were called in when one of the guards was found unconscious near the mine entrance. He came to in the hospital, babbling about cold hands and whispers in his ear. He quit the next day and moved to Florida. 2 more guards quit after that. Then a surveyor had what looked like a heart attack, even though he was only 28 and in perfect health. The company doctor couldn't explain it, but I knew what had happened. The children were getting desperate, and desperate ghosts were dangerous ghosts. They're going to hurt someone badly, I told Kevin. Or worse. What can we do about it? We can't exactly arrest a bunch of dead kids. We can give them what they want. I'd been thinking about Mrs. Patterson's words. The children wanted people to know the truth and remember what happened, but more than that, they wanted to prevent it from happening again. The original mining company had covered up their safety violations and never faced consequences. The families of the dead had never gotten justice. That's what the children were really fighting for. Justice. I called the state mining inspector and told him about the 1952 explosion, about the cover-up, about the documents I'd found proving the company knew about the gas pockets. I gave him names, dates, everything I'd discovered in my research. You're talking about something that happened 70 years ago, he said. Everyone involved is dead. What do you want me to do about it? Acknowledge it, I said. Officially. Put it in the record that those people died because of corporate negligence. Give their families the recognition they never got. He agreed to look into it, but that wasn't enough for the children. They could sense the mining operation getting closer to the sealed entrance, closer to disturbing their resting place. Their patience was running out. The final confrontation came on a Thursday night in August. The mining crew had brought in explosives to blast through the steel barrier. They were going to reopen the mine at dawn, flooding the tunnels with light and noise and heavy machinery. After 7 decades, they were going to wake the dead. Kevin and I were hiding in the trees, watching the worksite. We'd tried everything official, called the state, contacted the media, even reached out to the families of the original victims. But money talked louder than history, and the mining company had both permits and politicians on their side. At 11:30, the children came out of the mine. But these weren't the same playful spirits we'd seen before. These were angry, desperate, and more solid than ever. I could see them clearly without any special equipment. Dozens of children, all the ones who died in 1952, standing in formation around the mine entrance like a small army. Jimmy was at the front, his face grim with determination. He looked at me across the hollow and nodded once. Then he turned toward the mining equipment and raised his hand. Every light on the worksite exploded in a shower of sparks. Car alarms went off throughout the valley. The explosive charges that were supposed to blast open the mine entrance detonated all at once, but instead of blowing outward, they blew inward, sealing the entrance even more thoroughly. The mining foreman came running out of his trailer, screaming orders at guards who couldn't see what they were supposed to be guarding against. That's when the children made themselves known. They appeared in the floodlights like actors stepping onto a stage. Jimmy walked right up to the foreman, a boy who should have been middle-aged by now if he'd lived, and spoke in a voice that carried across the entire hollow. "You can't have our home," he said. "You can't dig where we sleep. Find your coal somewhere else." The foreman staggered backward, his face white with terror. He fumbled for his radio, calling for backup, calling for help, calling for anyone who could explain what was happening. But the children weren't finished. They'd tried subtle warnings, equipment failures, and polite scares. Now they were done being nice. The ground around the mine entrance began to crack and sink, like the old tunnels underneath were collapsing. The mining equipment tilted and toppled as the earth shifted beneath it. Warning sirens blared from the geological monitors, indicating massive underground instability. "Everyone out!" the foreman screamed. "Evacuate the site!" The mining crew ran for their trucks, but the children weren't going to let them escape so easily. They needed these adults to understand what they were dealing with, to spread the word that Hell Hollow was protected. Kevin grabbed my arm. "We have to get out of here too." But I couldn't leave. Not when Jimmy was finally getting his chance to be heard. The boy who'd been my little brother walked through the fleeing miners like they were made of water. He moved from person to person, touching each one on the forehead. When he did, they stopped running and stood perfectly still, their eyes wide and blank. "Feel what we felt," Jimmy said to each of them. "Know what we know." I realized he was sharing memories with them, showing them what it was like to die in a mine explosion, to be buried alive in the dark, to be forgotten by the world above. The miners began to cry, their faces twisting with the terror and pain of children who'd died decades before they were born. One by one, they collapsed to their knees, overwhelmed by the psychic weight of 47 deaths. But they weren't being hurt. They were being educated. They were learning why this place was sacred ground. When the last miner had received Jimmy's message, the children began to fade. But before they disappeared, Jimmy walked over to where I was standing. For the first time since his death, my little brother looked directly at me with recognition and love. "Thank you, Marty," he said. "Thank you for listening." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now they remember. Now they tell others. Now we can rest." He started to turn away, then looked back one more time. "Take care of our hollow," he said. "Keep it safe." Then all the children walked into the collapsed mine entrance and vanished into the earth that had claimed them so long ago. The mining operation shut down the next morning. The crew members who'd experienced Jimmy's visions refused to return to work, no matter how much money they were offered. They spread the story throughout the mining community, and soon every worker in eastern Kentucky knew about the ghost children of Hell Hollow. More importantly, the state mining inspector opened an official investigation into the 1952 explosion. Using the documents I'd provided, he was able to prove that Appalachian Coal Company had knowingly operated an unsafe mine and covered up the evidence afterward. 70 years too late, the victims finally got their justice. A memorial was built at the entrance to Hell Hollow, listing the names of all 47 people who died in the explosion. Their fams, Illies, those who were still alive, attended the dedication ceremony. Mrs. Patterson was there, 91 years old and in a wheelchair, but with tears of gratitude in her eyes. "They can rest now," she told me after the ceremony. "They know they won't be forgotten." The hollow itself was declared a historic preservation site, protected from any future mining operations. Hikers still come through sometimes, but they report a different atmosphere now. The place feels peaceful instead of haunted, quiet instead of threatening. I still patrol these hills, though I'll be retiring in a few years. Kevin transferred to another district, said he'd seen enough supernatural activity to last him several lifetimes. Can't say I blame him. Sometimes, on summer evenings when the light is just right, I catch glimpses of children playing in the hollow. But they're not the desperate, angry spirits they used to be. They're just kids having fun, the way they should have been able to do when they were alive. Jimmy visits me sometimes too, not as a ghost, but in dreams and quiet moments when I'm walking the trails we used to explore together. He doesn't need to warn me about anything anymore. He's just my little brother again, watching over me the way I always wished I could have watched over him. Hell Hollow taught me that some places hold on to their stories, and some stories are too important to be buried and forgotten. The dead don't always rest easy when they've been wronged, but they can find peace when someone finally listens to what they have to say. The mining company has moved on to other sites, other mountains, but word has spread through the industry about what happened here. Before they start digging now, they check the history. They ask the locals. They remember that some ground is sacred and some prices are too high to pay. And deep in the earth beneath Hell Hollow, 7 souls sleep peacefully at last, knowing their sacrifice meant something, knowing their deaths won't be forgotten. Sometimes the dead just need someone to speak for them. Sometimes they need someone to remember their names. And sometimes, if you listen carefully to the stories the mountains tell, you can hear the voices of children who died too young, still protecting the living from making the same mistakes. Their watch continues, their hollow endures, and their warning echoes through these hills. Some things should stay buried. Some places should stay sacred, and the dead will always protect what matters most. The children of Hell Hollow found their voice. They found their justice, and they found their peace. But they're still out there, watching over these mountains, making sure no more families have to lose what they lost. Because that's what children do. They protect the people they love, even long after love should have been possible. Even after death. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, but everyone calls me Ellie. I've been a park ranger for 13 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these Georgia mountains could throw at me. Bears, lost hikers, drug runners, flash floods. You name it, I've dealt with it. But I was wrong. Dead wrong. I grew up in these hills. My granny used to tell me stories about haints and spirits that walked the old Cherokee trails. She'd whisper about things that happened long before any white folks settled here. Back then, I'd roll my eyes and think it was just mountain folklore, old stories to scare kids into behaving. I never believed the dead could hold grudges for centuries. Blood Mountain is the highest peak in Georgia, right on the Appalachian Trail. Hikers love it for the views, but locals know better. We've had disappearances here since the 1800s. People just vanish. Sometimes we find their gear scattered around like they dropped everything and ran. Sometimes we don't find anything at all. The Cherokee used to call this place something else, but I never learned what. After they got forced out in 1838, the mountain got its new name. Some say it's because of all the battles fought here. Others say it's because the rocks turn red when it rains. I always figured it was just a name. That Tuesday in July 1972 started normal enough. I was checking in with dispatch when the call came through. 3 hikers had stumbled into the ranger station at Neal's Gap, looking like they'd seen a ghost. They were shaking so bad they could barely talk. Something followed us, the first one said. He was maybe 25, college kid from Atlanta. We couldn't see it, but it was throwing rocks at us. Big ones. His girlfriend nodded fast. It whispered things, horrible things, in a language we didn't understand. The third hiker, an older man with expensive gear, just kept staring at his hands. It knew our names, he said quietly. It knew things about us, private things. My partner David Holbrook laughed when I told him about it later. Dave's been a ranger for 8 years, and he's got no patience for what he calls mountain superstition. He's a city boy from Macon, thinks everything can be explained with science and common sense. Probably just some local kids messing with tourists, he said, adjusting his radio. You mountain folk and your ghost stories. I should have listened to that little voice in my head telling me something was different this time. The hikers weren't drunk college kids looking for attention. They were experienced backpackers, and the fear in their eyes was real. We loaded up the truck with camping gear and headed up to investigate. The plan was simple. Hike to where the incident happened, look around, maybe spend the night if needed. Standard procedure for this kind of thing. The drive up was quiet. Too quiet. Usually these mountains are full of life. Birds singing, squirrels chattering, insects buzzing. But as we got higher, everything went silent. Even our truck engine seemed muffled. You notice how still it is? I asked Dave. He shrugged. It's hot. Animals are probably hiding in the shade. But I'd lived here all my life. This wasn't normal. We parked at the trailhead and started hiking toward Neal's Gap shelter. That's where the hikers said it started. The temperature was in the 80s, but I kept getting cold shivers. My compass started acting funny too, needle spinning like it couldn't find north. Equipment's probably getting old, Dave said when I showed him. But his compass was doing the same thing. 2 hours in, we found the first sign that something was wrong. Rocks were arranged in a perfect circle around a small clearing. Not random rocks, big ones that would take 2 people to move. They formed symbols I'd never seen before, but they made my skin crawl just looking at them. Kids again, Dave said, but he didn't sound as sure as before. I knelt down to look closer. The arrangement was too precise, too purposeful. And the rocks were old, covered in lichen and moss that takes years to grow. No way some teenagers did this as a prank. That's when we heard the first whisper. It was soft, like wind through leaves, but there was no wind. The words weren't English, but somehow I understood them. They were angry words, warning words. Dave heard it too. I could tell by the way he went rigid, hand moving toward his radio. Hello? He called out. Park Service. If someone's out there, identify yourself. The whispers stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. It felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of there. But we were rangers. We had a job to do. We set up camp about 100 yards from the rock circle. Dave insisted on staying close to investigate, even though every fiber of my being said we should leave. As the sun went down, the temperature dropped fast. Too fast for July in Georgia. "Weather's weird tonight," I said, pulling on my jacket. Dave checked his thermometer. "Says it's 58 degrees. That's impossible." I'd brought some firewood, but it wouldn't catch. The matches would light, but the second they touched the wood, they'd go out, like something was blowing them out. But there was no wind. "Must be damp," Dave said, but I could hear doubt creeping into his voice. We broke out the camp stoves for warmth and settled in to wait. Dave pulled out a sandwich and started eating, trying to act normal. I couldn't stomach food. Something was coming. I could feel it. Around 10 o'clock, the rock throwing started. The first one hit our tent with a thud that made us both jump. Then another, and another. Small rocks at first, then bigger ones. They were coming from the trees, but when we shined our flashlights, we couldn't see anyone. "Must be raccoons," Dave said, but his voice was shaking. They knocked the wings down from trees. A rock the size of a baseball slammed into the ground right between us. No raccoon could throw that hard. "Park Service," Dave yelled into the darkness. "Come out now, or we're calling for backup." The rock stopped. For about 10 seconds, everything was quiet. Then it spoke. "You don't belong here." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It was a woman's voice, but wrong somehow, like several women talking at once, their words overlapping. Dave grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Holbrook. We need backup at Blood Mountain. Coordinates." Static. Nothing but static. "Dispatch, do you copy?" The radio crackled, and for a moment we heard voices, but they weren't speaking English. It sounded like Cherokee, the old language my grandmother sometimes used when she was really upset. "This land remembers," the voice said, clearer now. "This land knows what you did." I felt ice forming in my stomach. Not fear, actual ice. My breath started coming out in clouds. "We didn't do anything," Dave called out, trying to sound brave. "We're just park rangers." Laughter echoed through the trees, cold, bitter laughter that made my teeth ache. "Your people," the voice said. "Your families. They did enough." That's when I saw her. At first it was just a shadow moving between the trees. Then the shadow got darker, more solid. A woman stepped into our firelight, but she wasn't quite there. I could see through her, like looking at a reflection in water. She was Cherokee, wearing traditional clothes that were torn and bloody. Bullet holes dotted her chest. Her long black hair was matted with dirt and blood. But her eyes were the worst part. They glowed with a cold, white light that seemed to look right through me. Behind her, I could see other shapes, smaller ones. Children. Dave made a sound like he was choking. He tried to stand up, but his legs wouldn't walk. "Orc, you know me," she said, looking right at me. "Your grandmother knew me. She told you stories." My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. "The Bell Witch walks Blood Mountain, child. She's looking for justice that never came." "You're the Bell Witch," I whispered. She smiled, showing teeth stained with blood. "I am Ayana of the Cherokee. I died on this mountain with my children. We were running from your soldiers. They caught us here." The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Ice started forming on our tent. "That was over 100 years ago," Dave said, finding his voice. "We had nothing to do with that." "Your family did," she said, turning those terrible eyes on him. "David Holbrook, your great-great-grandfather wore a blue uniform. He carried a rifle. He followed orders." Dave went white. "That's impossible. You can't know that." "I know everything about you," she said. "David Michael Holbrook, born in Macon. Your mother's maiden name was Crawford. You have a scar on your knee from falling off your bicycle when you were 7. You're afraid of spiders. Should I tell you more?" How could she know those things? There was no way anyone could know those private details about Dave's life. The shapes behind her were getting clearer. I could see the children now. 3 of them, all with the same glowing eyes, all with wounds that would have killed them. We died cold and hungry, she continued, shot down like animals. Our bodies left for the wolves. No burial, no respect, no justice. What do you want? I asked. She turned to me, and for a moment her expression softened. Your family was different, Eleanor Whitmore. Your people tried to help, but they were too few, too late. Relief flooded through me, but it didn't last long. You will pay for the sins of the others, she said. Someone must pay. The children stepped forward. They looked maybe 8 to 10 years old, but their faces were ancient with anger. One of them pointed at Dave. He is first, the child said, in a voice that sounded like grinding stone. Dave scrambled to his feet and ran. I heard him crashing through the underbrush, heading down the mountain. His flashlight beam danced wildly through the trees, getting farther away. Then it stopped. His scream echoed off the mountainside, high and terrified. It went on for maybe 10 seconds, then cut off suddenly. I was alone with the Bell Witch and her children. I grabbed my flashlight and ran after Dave, but it was like running through mud. Every step was harder than the last. The air itself seemed to be fighting me. Dave! I called out. Dave, where are you? My voice echoed strangely, like I was shouting in a cave. The darkness between the trees was absolute. My flashlight beam seemed to die after just a few feet. I found him about 50 yards down the trail. He was sitting with his back against a tree, staring at nothing. His flashlight lay broken beside him. Dave, are you hurt? He didn't answer. His eyes were wide open, but he wasn't seeing me. He was looking at something else, something I couldn't see. Dave, we need to get out of here. Still nothing. I shook his shoulder and he finally blinked. They're all around us, he whispered. Hundreds of them. All the families that died on this mountain. I looked around but saw only trees and darkness. I don't see anyone. They're there, he said. Watching, waiting. I helped him to his feet. He felt like dead weight, like all the strength had gone out of him. We started back toward camp, but something was wrong with the trail. It kept curving in directions it shouldn't curve. Paths appeared that weren't there before. We're going in circles, Dave said, after we passed the same fallen log for the 3rd time. He was right. No matter which direction we walked, we ended up back where we started. The mountain wasn't letting us leave. My watch said it was midnight, but it felt like we'd been walking for hours. Then I checked it again. Still not. Night. The hands weren't moving. Time stopped, I told Dave. He looked at his own watch and went even paler. That's impossible. Everything about this is impossible. That's when we heard the singing. It started soft and far away, like a lullaby. Cherokee words I didn't understand, but the melody was heartbreaking. It was the sound of mothers singing to children who would never grow up. The singing got closer, and with it came the cold. Our breath started forming clouds again. Ice crystals appeared on the trees around us. In July. In Georgia. She's coming back, Dave said. The Bell Witch stepped out of the shadows ahead of us, but she looked different now. Angrier, more solid. The bullet wounds in her chest were bleeding fresh blood that steamed in the cold air. You tried to run, she said. Like we tried to run. But there's nowhere to go. Behind her, more spirits appeared. Not just her children, but dozens of Cherokee men, women, and children. All with the same wounds, all with the same glowing eyes, all dead because of what happened on this mountain in 1838. Listen to me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We're sorry for what happened to you, but we weren't there. We didn't do it. Your people did it, she replied. Your blood carries their guilt. My family tried to help, I said, remembering something my grandmother once told me. My great-great-grandmother hid Cherokee families in her root cellar. She helped them escape. The Bell Witch tilted her head, studying me. Sarah Whitmore, yes, she saved 12 families, but thousands died. Then why punish me? Because someone must answer. Someone must pay the debt. She raised her hand and Dave started choking. His eyes bulged as invisible fingers closed around his throat. "Stop!" I shouted. "He's innocent!" "Innocent?" The Bell Witch laughed that cold, bitter laugh again. "His ancestor killed my youngest son, shot him in the back as he ran. The boy was 6 years old." Dave was turning blue. He clawed at his throat, but there was nothing there to fight. "Please," I begged, "let him go. Take me instead." "I will take you both," she said. "But first, he must understand what he carries." She touched Dave's forehead with one ghostly finger. Dave screamed. Not a normal scream. This was the sound of pure anguish. His whole body convulsed as visions flooded his mind. I could see them too somehow. Cherokee families running through the snow, soldiers with rifles, children crying for their mothers, bodies left unburied. When it was over, Dave collapsed. But when he looked up, his eyes had changed. They glowed with the same white light as the spirits. "I remember," he said, but his voice was different, older, speaking with a Cherokee accent. "I remember the cold, the hunger, the fear." "Dave?" He turned to look at me, and I knew my partner was gone. Something else was wearing his face now. "My name is Joseph Running Bear," he said in that strange new voice. "I died here in 1838. This man's ancestor killed me." The possessed Dave stood up with movements that weren't quite human. Too fluid. Too quick. "Now, I will kill him." I ran. Behind me I could hear Dave, or whatever was controlling him, crashing through the forest. He was moving faster than any human could move, leaping over fallen logs, dodging between trees like he could see in the dark. I had a head start, but it wouldn't last long. The trail ahead split in 3 directions. I took the middle path, hoping it would lead back to our truck, but after a few minutes I realized I was going deeper into the mountains, not toward the parking area. Something was wrong with the geography. Trails that should go down were going up. The mountain was bigger than it should be, like it was stretching itself out to trap me. I stopped to catch my breath and check my compass. The needle was spinning wildly, pointing in all directions at once. My map showed I should be near the summit, but I could see peaks rising, all around me that weren't supposed to exist. A howl echoed through the darkness behind me. It sounded like Dave, but no human throat could make that noise. I kept running. The path led to a cave I'd never seen before, even though I'd hiked this mountain dozens of times. I didn't want to go in, but I could hear my pursuer getting closer. The cave might give me somewhere to hide. Inside, my flashlight revealed something that made my blood freeze. Bones. Hundreds of human bones, arranged in careful patterns on the cave floor. Men, women, children. Whole families laid out like they were sleeping. But these weren't old bones. They looked fresh, and they were arranged according to Cherokee burial customs. "This is where we brought them," a voice said behind me. I spun around. The Bell Witch stood in the cave entrance, blocking my escape. "After your people left them to rot in the sun, we carried their spirits here. We gave them the burial they deserved, but spirits cannot rest while their killers go unpunished." "Their killers are dead," I said. "They died 100 years ago." "Their blood lives on," she replied. "In you, in him. The debt passes from generation to generation until someone has the courage to pay it." Dave appeared beside her, but he wasn't Dave anymore. His skin was gray, his movements jerky like a broken puppet. The thing controlling him smiled with Dave's mouth. "Time to join the others," it said in that Cherokee-accented voice. They stepped toward me, and I backed deeper into the cave. My light played over the bones, and I noticed something. Mixed in with the Cherokee remains were other skeletons. Newer ones, wearing the torn remains of modern hiking clothes. All the missing people, all the disappearances over the years. They'd all ended up here. "Now you understand," the Bell Witch said. "We take one life for every Cherokee who died, one soul for every soul stolen. It is justice. It's murder. It is balance." She reached for me with hands that flickered between flesh and bone. Ice formed where her fingers touched the air. I had nowhere left to run. As the Bell Witch reached for me, something my grandmother used to say popped into my head. When you meet a spirit, child, you don't fight it. You listen to what it needs. Wait, I said, holding up my hands. You said someone needs to pay the debt. What if there was another way? She stopped, her glowing eyes narrowing. What way? What do you really want? Justice? Or just revenge? They are the same thing. No, they're not. I was talking fast, trying to buy time, but also trying to understand. Justice means people know what happened. It means the story gets told. It means your people are remembered. The Bell Witch tilted her head, listening. Revenge is just killing, I continued. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't bring your family back. It doesn't make people remember what happened here. And what would you know of justice? The possessed Dave asked. Your people have forgotten us, erased us, built your trails over our graves. Then help me change that, I said. Let me tell your story. Let me make sure people know what really happened on this mountain. The Bell Witch studied me for a long moment. The cave was so cold now that ice was forming on the walls. You would do this? She asked. Even knowing what it would cost you? What would it cost me? She smiled, but it wasn't a cruel smile anymore. It was sad, ancient, tired. To tell our story truly, you must first understand our pain. You must feel what we felt, experience what we experienced. And then you will carry our burden. Our memories will become yours. You will never be free of us. I looked at Dave, possessed and changed forever. I thought about all the hikers who had vanished on this mountain. I thought about my grandmother's stories and how I'd never really listened. Okay, I said. I'll do it. The Bell Witch reached out and touched my forehead. The world exploded. Suddenly I was a Cherokee woman running through snow with children clinging to my dress. Soldiers were shouting behind us. Guns were firing. My youngest son stumbled and fell, and when I turned back for him, I saw the rifle pointing at his small body. The bullet tore through him like he was made of paper. I screamed and kept screaming as more bullets found their marks. My daughter, my husband, my mother, all of them cut down while trying to escape. I felt the cold seeping into my bones as I lay dying. I felt the fear and rage and desperate love for my family. I felt the injustice of it all, the terrible unfairness that we were dying for the crime of existing on land that had been ours for generations. But most of all, I felt the binding, the way trauma and grief and unfinished business can anchor a spirit to the earth, the way love for family can be so strong that even death cannot break it. When the vision ended, I was on my knees in the cave, crying tears that turned to ice before they hit the ground. Now you know, the Bell Witch said softly. Now you understand why we cannot rest. I looked up at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a monster. I saw a mother who had lost everything, a woman who had watched her children die and had nothing left but rage and sorrow. I understand, I whispered, but this isn't the way. It is the only way we know. No. I struggled to my feet, still shaking from the visions. There's another way. Help me build a memorial. Help me make sure every hiker who comes through here knows what happened. Let me work with the Cherokee Nation to honor your people properly. She was quiet for a long time, considering. And if we do this, she finally said, what happens to him? She nodded toward Dave. I looked at my partner. The thing controlling him was still there, but I could see Dave fighting it. His real self was trapped inside, struggling to get free. You let him go, I said. You let both of us go. We make this right together. He carries the blood of killers, and I carry the blood of helpers. Maybe that's what matters. Maybe we balance each other out. The Bell Witch closed her eyes. When she opened them again, some of the cold light had faded. Very well, she said. But know this, if you fail us, if you break this promise, we will find you. And next time there will be no bargaining. She touched Dave's forehead. He convulsed once, then collapsed. When he looked up again, his eyes were his own. Ellie, he said weakly, what happened? I remember things, terrible things. It's over, I told him, though I knew that wasn't quite true. The Bell Witch and the other spirits were fading, becoming transparent again. Remember us, she said as she disappeared. Remember all of us. We found our way out of the cave as dawn was breaking. The trails were normal again, leading back to our truck. Our radios worked. Our compasses pointed north. But we were different. Dave didn't remember everything, but he remembered enough. The visions had changed him. He was quieter now, more respectful when we dealt with Cherokee visitors to the park. He started learning their language. I remembered it all. The official report said Dave had suffered a severe allergic reaction that caused hallucinations and disorientation. Heat exhaustion. Nothing supernatural, nothing unexplainable. But I kept my promise. I spent the next year working with Cherokee elders, learning about the history of Blood Mountain and the Trail of Tears. I pushed for a memorial at the trailhead. It took fighting with bureaucrats and politicians, but eventually we got one. A simple stone marker that tells the true story of what happened here in 1838. I also convinced the Park Service to hire Cherokee guides for educational programs. Joseph Running Bear, an elder from the Eastern Band, comes twice a month to tell visitors about his ancestors. He's the great-grandson of the spirit that possessed Dave, though we never told him about that part. The strange occurrences on Blood Mountain didn't stop completely. Hikers still report cold spots and whispered voices, but the disappearances ended. Whatever debt the Bell Witch was collecting, she seemed satisfied for now. Dave transferred to another park after 6 months, said he needed a change of scenery. I understood. The mountain had marked us both, but it was harder for him to carry. I stayed. Someone needed to watch over the memorial, to make sure visitors understood what they were seeing. Someone needed to leave tobacco offerings at the Cherokee burial sites, the way Joseph Running Bear taught me. And someone needed to listen if the Bell Witch ever came back, because she's still here. I feel her sometimes when I'm hiking alone on the mountain, a presence in the shadows, watching, making sure I keep my word. Last month, a developer tried to buy land near the memorial for a ski resort. His surveying equipment kept malfunctioning. His workers reported being followed by invisible presences that threw rocks and whispered threats. The project was canceled after a week. Some debts, my grandmother used to say, pass from generation to generation until someone has the courage to pay them. But some promises, once made, last forever. I'm still paying, still keeping watch, still carrying the memories of Cherokee families who died on this mountain over a century ago. And I'll keep carrying them until the day I die. Because that's what it means to remember the dead. That's what it means to seek real justice instead of just revenge. The Bell Witch taught me that. In the end, she taught me the difference between the two. My name is Thomas McLeod, and I've been a ranger at Grandfather Mountain for 19 years. In all that time, I thought I knew every animal that lived in these North Carolina woods. Black bears, sure. Mountain lions, maybe one or two. But nothing like what I saw that October night in 1965. I'm 42 years old, and my family came here from Scotland way back. My grandfather used to tell me scary stories about monsters in the Highland Mountains, but I figured they were just tales to keep kids from wandering off. Growing up in these Blue Ridge Mountains, I learned to track real animals. I know what bear prints look like. I know how they hunt, how they move, how they smell. That's why I didn't believe the farmers at first. Tom, something's killing my cattle, old Pete Morrison told me one morning. He was standing in my office, hat in his hands, looking scared. But it ain't like any bear I ever seen. What makes you say that? I asked, pouring myself some coffee. The tracks, Tom, they're huge, bigger than dinner plates. And there's something else. He paused like he didn't want to say it out loud. They got 6 toes. I almost laughed. 6 toes. But Pete wasn't the joking type. He'd lived on his farm for 30 years and knew animals better than most people. Show me, I said. We drove out to his place in my Jeep. The morning fog was still thick between the trees, making everything look spooky. Pete's farm sat in a valley below Grandfather Mountain, where the famous swinging bridge hung a mile high in the air. Tourists loved that bridge, but locals knew these mountains had secrets. Pete led me to where his prize bull had been killed. The sight made my stomach turn. The bull was huge, probably weighed 1,500 pounds, but something had torn its throat out with a single bite. The teeth marks were massive, bigger than any bear could make. But the tracks worse. They were bear-like but wrong in every way. Too big, too deep, and yes, 6 toes instead of 5. The claws had dug 8 inches into an oak tree, higher than any normal bear could reach. I made plaster casts, Pete said, pulling out white molds of the prints. Figured you'd want proof. I took the casts, feeling their weight. These weren't fake. Something real had made these marks. But what? There's more, Pete said quietly. My neighbor found his dog dead yesterday. Same kind of bite. And the Hendersons lost 3 chickens, but here's the weird part. Whatever killed them arranged the feathers in a perfect circle. A chill ran down my back. Animals don't arrange things. Only people do that. I'll investigate, I told Pete. But I'm bringing backup. Back at the ranger station, I called my partner, Patricia Hayes. She was 26, fresh out of forestry school, and believed everything had a scientific explanation. Smart as a whip, but she'd only been working with me for 3 years. She hadn't seen the strange things these mountains could hide. 6-toed bear tracks? She said when I told her. Tom, that's impossible. It's probably just 2 prints overlapping. Come see for yourself, I said. We drove back to Pete's farm that afternoon. Patricia examined everything with the careful eye of someone trained in wildlife biology. She measured the tracks, photographed them, even took samples of the torn bark. These are definitely real, she finally admitted. But there has to be an explanation. Maybe it's a bear with a birth defect. A 12-foot-tall bear with opposable thumbs? I asked, pointing to where the creature had grabbed the oak tree. She didn't have an answer for that. As the sun started setting, we decided to head back, but as we walked to my Jeep, I heard something that made me freeze. A howl, but not like any animal I'd ever heard. It was long, ow and deep, almost like a man screaming, but with something wild and hungry mixed in. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, echoing off the mountains. Patricia grabbed my arm. What was that? I don't know, I said. But I was lying. Deep down, in a part of my mind that remembered my grandfather's stories, I thought I did know. But that was impossible. The howl came again, closer this time, and in the distance, something big was moving through the trees. We didn't see it clearly that first night, but I knew something was watching us. The feeling stayed with me all the way home, like cold fingers on my neck. The next morning, I called Samuel Crow Feather. He was a Cherokee medicine man who lived near the reservation, and he knew these mountains better than anyone. His people had been here for thousands of years before the Scottish settlers arrived. Samuel, I need to ask you about something, I said when he answered the phone. You mean about the thing that's been killing animals, he said before I could explain. That stopped me cold. How did you know? The spirits have been restless. My grandmother told me stories about creatures like this. We call it Yahyahash, a corrupted bear spirit. It's been sleeping for a long time. Sleeping? These things, they wake up every 50 years or so, always around the new moon. And Tom? His voice got serious. It's not just hunting for food, it's hunting for something specific. What do you mean? Check your family history. Ask your grandmother about the old stories from Scotland. I think you'll find this isn't the first time your family has met this creature. After I hung up, my hands were shaking. I drove straight to my grandmother's house. She was 87 and sharp as a tack, living in the same cabin my great-grandfather built when he came from Scotland. Grandma, I need to ask you about the old stories. the ones about monsters in Scotland. Her face went pale. She sat down heavily in her rocking chair. "I was hoping I'd never have to tell you," she said quietly. "But if you're asking, it means the Q-Sith has found us again." "The what?" "Sit down, Tommy." She went to her bedroom and came back with an old leather diary. This belonged to my mother-in-law. She wrote about the creature that terrorized our clan in the Highland Mountains. She opened the diary and read to me in a shaky voice. "The beast stands 12 feet tall, black fur with silver streaks, red eyes like burning coals. It has the body of a bear, but moves like a man. It can disappear into solid rock and appears without warning. And worst of all, it hunts the MacLeod bloodline until the debt is paid." "What debt?" I asked. "That's the part we never understood. But Tommy, this creature killed your great-great-grandfather in Scotland in 1865. It killed your great-grandfather here in these very mountains in 1915. Now it's 1965 and it's come for me," I finished. That night, Patricia and I went back to patrol the area around Pete's farm. We had powerful flashlights and a radio, but I also brought something else, an old silver knife that had belonged to my great-grandfather. Grandma called it a dirk, and she said it had been blessed by a clan shaman back in Scotland. "You really think we're dealing with something supernatural?" Patricia asked as we walked through the dark woods. "I don't know what to think anymore," I said honestly. We were checking the area where the bull had been killed when Patricia suddenly stopped. "Tom, look." Ahead of us, barely visible in the moonlight, was a perfect circle made of stones. In the center lay the remains of several small animals: rabbits, squirrels, a raccoon, all arranged in a pattern. "Animals don't do this," Patricia whispered. That's when we heard the breathing. Heavy, raspy breathing coming from somewhere above us. We pointed our flashlights up into the trees but saw nothing. The breathing moved, circling us like a predator studying it, as prey. Then we saw the eyes. 2 red dots glowing in the darkness, at least 12 feet off the ground. They weren't in a tree. They were floating in midair, watching us with terrible intelligence. "Run," I said quietly. "What?" "Run!" We ran through the dark forest, branches tearing at our clothes, roots trying to trip us. Behind us came a sound like thunder, something huge crashing through the trees, gaining on us fast. Patricia stumbled and fell. I helped her up, but when I looked back, I saw it clearly for the first time. The creature was exactly like my grandmother had described. 12 feet tall, covered in black fur with silver streaks, red eyes burning like fire. But the worst part was its face. It was almost human, with intelligence and hunger, and something that might have been hate. It stood at the edge of the clearing, just watching us. Then it smiled, showing teeth like white daggers. "You smell like the others, MacLeod," it said in a voice like gravel and broken glass. "Like your grandfather. Like your great-grandfather. You all smell like fear." Patricia screamed. The creature laughed, a sound worse than its howl. And then it was gone. Not running away, not hiding. Gone, like it had never been there at all. We made it back to my Jeep and drove to the ranger station without saying a word. But when we got there, we found something that made our blood freeze. Scratched into the metal door, 8 inches deep, were claw marks spelling out a message. The debt must be paid. The attacks started getting worse after that night. 3 more farms lost livestock, and each time the creature left the same stone circles. But now it was getting bolder, killing closer to town, leaving messages carved into trees and buildings. Patricia threw herself into research, trying to find a scientific explanation. She discovered that similar creatures had been reported all across the Appalachian Mountains, but only in areas where Scottish families had settled. She also found records going back to 1865, showing attacks every 50 years, like clockwork. "Look, at this," she said, spreading old newspaper clippings across my desk. 1865, creature kills Malcolm MacLeod in Scotland. 1915, creature kills Duncan MacLeod here in North Carolina. 1965. "It comes for me," I said. "But why?" What's this debt it keeps talking about? I'd been wondering the same thing. That night, I had a dream that felt more real than any dream should. I was standing in a highland meadow, watching my ancestor, a MacLeod warrior from centuries ago, battle the same creature. In the dream, I understood that my family had made some kind of bargain long ago, promising something to the beast in exchange for power or protection. But the deal had gone wrong, and now the creature followed my bloodline across generations, across oceans, demanding payment. I woke up knowing one thing for certain. This wouldn't end until either the creature or I was dead. The next few weeks were like living in a nightmare. The beast seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. It would appear on the mile-high swinging bridge, terrifying tourists. It would show up at farms but vanish the moment anyone arrived to investigate. It seemed to know exactly where Patricia and I would patrol, always staying just out of reach. But it was learning about us too. One night, we found Patricia's apartment had been broken into. Nothing was stolen, but all her research papers were arranged in that same stone circle pattern on her living room floor. The message was clear. It was watching us, studying us. "This has to stop," Patricia said. She looked exhausted, scared. "We need to call the state police, the FBI, someone. And tell them what? That a supernatural creature is stalking me because of some ancient family curse? Then what do we do?" Before I could answer, we heard screaming outside. We rushed out to find Mrs. Henderson from down the street standing in her yard, pointing at her roof. The creature was up there, silhouetted against the full moon, holding something in its claws. As we watched, it dropped the object at our feet. It was Patricia's badge, the one she'd lost 3 days earlier. But now it was bent into the shape of a Celtic knot, the kind of design my ancestors used to make in Scotland. "Come and face me, MacLeod," the creature called down. Its voice carried easily in the night air. "Come to the place where your great-grandfather died. Come alone, or I'll start killing everyone in this town, one by one." "Where?" I shouted back. "You know where. The old stone circle, below the swinging bridge. Tomorrow night, when the moon is dark." Then it was gone again, leaving only the smell of something wild and old and wrong. Patricia grabbed my arm. "You can't go. It's a trap. If I don't go, it'll kill innocent people. You heard what it said." "Then I'm coming with you." "No." I looked at her seriously. "This is my family's fight. Has been for generations. I won't let you die because of something my ancestors did." But Patricia Hayes was stubborn. She'd been my partner for 3 years, and she wasn't about to abandon me now. "I'm coming," she said firmly. "You can't stop me." The next evening, we made our way through the dark forest toward Grandfather Mountain. I carried my great-grandfather's silver dirk, and Patricia brought a rifle loaded with silver bullets she'd made herself. She'd also been talking to Samuel Crow Feather, learning about Cherokee protection rituals. "Just in case," she said, showing me a pouch of sacred tobacco and sage. The stone circle was in a clearing below the famous swinging bridge, hidden from tourist trails. When we got there, the creature was waiting. It stood in the center of the circle, and for the first time I could see it clearly in the starlight. It was even more terrifying up close, ancient, powerful, and filled with a hatred that seemed to burn like fire. "MacLeod," it said, and its voice made the ground tremble. 5 generations I've hunted your family. 5 generations I've been denied. And what was promised?" "What was promised?" I demanded. "What debt are you talking about?" The creature smiled with those terrible teeth. "Your ancestor swore his bloodline would serve me for eternity. In exchange, I gave his clan victory over their enemies. But when the debt came due, he tried to escape by sailing to America. So you followed him?" "I followed all of them. And I'll keep following until every MacLeod is dead, or until one of you finally pays what was promised." "What was promised?" Patricia shouted. The creature turned its red eyes on her. "A life freely given. A MacLeod who chooses to serve me forever, body and soul." "That's not going to happen," I said, raising the silver dirk. The creature laughed. Then you'll die like the others. But first, your friend dies. It moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. One moment it was 20 feet away, the next it had Patricia in its claws. "No!" I screamed, running forward. The creature's claws pierced her chest. She looked at me with wide, shocked eyes, blood running from her mouth. "Tom," she whispered, and then she was gone. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. I charged at the beast with the silver dirk, not caring if I lived or died, only wanting to hurt the thing that had killed my partner. The blade bit deep into the creature's side, and it screamed, a sound like breaking glass and dying animals. Silver fire spread from the wound, and for a moment, the beast looked almost human. "You cannot kill me, MacLeod," it snarled. "I am eternal. I am bound to your bloodline until the debt is paid." But the silver was hurting it. The creature backed away, clutching its wounded side. That's when I understood what I had to do. "I'll pay the debt," I said. The creature stopped, surprised. "What?" "You heard me. I'll serve you forever if you promise to leave my family alone. And no more hunting MacLeods. No more killing innocent people." Patricia's body lay still in the grass, and seeing her there made my heart break. But if my death could save others, maybe it was worth it. "Tom, no," came a weak voice. I spun around. Patricia was trying to sit up, blood still flowing from her wounds, but somehow alive. "She's dying," the creature said with satisfaction. "But slowly. She has maybe an hour before the pain stops forever." "Heal her," I demanded. "If I agree to serve you, heal her first." The creature considered this. "You would trade your eternal soul for her brief mortal life?" "Yes." Something changed in the beast's red eyes. For just a moment, it looked almost sad. "You're different from the others," it said slowly. "Your great-grandfather begged for his own life. Your great-great-grandfather tried to bargain with gold and land. But you offer yourself to save someone else." I knelt beside Patricia, holding her hand. She was getting weaker, but she squeezed my fingers. "Don't do it," she whispered. "There has to be another way." But I couldn't see one. The creature was too powerful, too fast. The silver dirk had hurt it, but not enough. And more people would die if I didn't end this now. "I accept," I told the beast. "I'll serve you forever, if you heal her, and promise to leave everyone else alone." The creature moved closer, towering over us. "Very well. But first, you must understand what you're choosing. I am not just a monster, MacLeod. I am a force of nature, older than your civilization. I exist to punish those who break sacred oaths. Your ancestor made a promise and tried to escape it. That cannot be allowed." "I understand." "Do you? Your service means more than death. It means becoming like me, eternal, hungry, forever hunting those who break their word. You'll lose everything that makes you human." Patricia tried to sit up. "Tom, listen to me. There might be another way." Samuel Crowfeather told me something. These creatures, they're bound by rules older than memory. If you can defeat it in single combat, using a tribe's own nature against it. The creature laughed. "Foolish girl, no mortal can defeat me." But Patricia wasn't finished. "It can phase through solid matter, right? But there's always a moment of weakness when it shifts between states. A moment when it exists in both worlds at once." I looked at the silver dirk in my hand, remembering my grandmother's words. It had been blessed by a clan shaman, made specifically to fight supernatural creatures. "When you appeared on the bridge," I said to the beast, "you seemed solid. When you vanished, you became like smoke. But there has to be a moment between those states when you're vulnerable." The creature's eyes narrowed. "You think you can time such a moment? You think your human reflexes are fast enough? I think I have to try." I helped Patricia lean against a tree, then faced the creature. "New deal, single combat. If I win, you leave forever and never bother my family again. If you win, you can have my soul. And if you lose, your friend dies too." I looked at Patricia. She nodded weakly. "Do it." The creature considered for a long moment, then smiled that terrible smile. Very well, but you'll fight me at the place where your bloodline has the most power, and where I have the most as well. It gestured toward the mountain looming above us. The swinging bridge. We made our way up the steep trail in darkness, the creature sometimes walking, sometimes floating, always watching me with those burning red eyes. Patricia insisted on coming, even though she could barely stand. She'd torn strips from her shirt to bandage her wounds, but she was still losing blood. The mile-high swinging bridge stretched across a deep gorge, connecting two peaks of Grandfather Mountain. During the day, tourists loved to walk across it and look at the view. At night, in the darkness, it looked like a path to hell. "This is where your great-grandfather died," the creature said as we reached the bridge. "He thought he could trap me here, use the height to his advantage. He was wrong." The bridge swayed in the wind, cables creaking, ominously. Far below, rocks and trees were barely visible in the starlight. "The rules are simple," the creature continued. "No weapons except what you carry. No help from anyone else. Fight until one of us falls or dies." I gripped the silver dirk tighter. "I'm ready." The creature began to change. Its form became less solid, more like smoke and shadow. "Are you sure, MacLeod? Last chance to simply accept your fate." Instead of answering, I charged. The beast tried to phase through my attack, becoming smoke just as the dirk reached it. But I'd been watching carefully, and Patricia was right. There was a moment, just an instant, when it existed in both states at once. I twisted the blade at the last second, and silver bit into something solid. The creature screamed and became fully solid again, clutching a deep wound in its chest. Black blood flowed between its claws. "Impossible!" it snarled, but I was already moving, pressing my advantage. The beast was powerful and fast, but it was used to hunting victims who ran in terror. It wasn't used to someone who fought back. We battled across the swaying bridge, the creature slashing with claws that could tear through steel, me dodging and striking with the blessed silver blade. Each time it tried to phase away, I watched for that moment of vulnerability. The third time I hit it, something changed. The creature's form began to flicker, like a candle in the wind. "You're killing me," it said, and for the first time it sounded afraid. "Good," I replied. But the beast had one more trick. Instead of attacking me directly, it grabbed the bridge cables and began shaking the entire structure. The metal walkway bucked and swayed like a wild horse trying to throw me off. I lost my footing and fell, barely catching one of the cables as I dropped. The creature loomed over me, its claws reaching down. "Time to join your ancestors, Ma. Cleod." That's when Patricia arrived. Despite her wounds, despite being barely able to stand, she'd followed us up the mountain. In her hands was something I hadn't expected. A Cherokee fire arrow, the tip burning with sacred tobacco and sage. "This is for all the people you've killed," she shouted, and let the arrow fly. It hit the creature's center mass, and the sacred fire spread across its body like it was made of dry leaves. The beast screamed, a sound that echoed across the mountains, and staggered backward. I pulled myself back onto the bridge and raised the silver dirk. "The debt is paid," I said, and drove the blade deep into the creature's heart. For a moment, the beast stood there, looking almost human again. Its red eyes faded to brown, and its expression became sad rather than angry. 500 years, it whispered. 500 years I've been bound to this curse. Thank you, MacLeod. Thank you for setting me free." Then it fell backward off the bridge, tumbling into the darkness below. Patricia survived, though she spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The doctor said it was a miracle. Her wounds should have been fatal, but somehow they'd missed all her vital organs. I didn't tell them that supernatural creatures sometimes have their own strange rules about who lives and who dies. The official report listed her injuries as the result of a bear attack. The creature's body was never found, despite extensive searches of the gorge below the bridge. Some of the other rangers said they'd seen bear tracks down there, but nothing unusual. I stayed on at Grandfather Mountain, watching and waiting. Samuel Crowfeather told me the mountain felt peaceful now, like an old wound had finally healed, but he also warned me that other creatures might be drawn to the area, sensing the spiritual disturbance the beast had left behind. He was right. Over the next few months, we had reports of strange lights in the forest, animals behaving oddly, and campers finding stone circles they swore hadn't been there the day before. Nothing as dangerous as the beast, but signs that the supernatural world was more active than usual. I trained my son in the old ways, teaching him about our family history and the responsibilities that came with the MacLeod name. Not because I expected him to face the same creature, that particular curse was broken, but because there were other things in these mountains, other old promises and ancient debts that might someday come due. Patricia transferred to a different park after she recovered, but we stayed in touch. She'd seen too much to ever be the same person who believed everything had a scientific explanation. But she'd also learned that some things were worth fighting for, even when the odds seemed impossible. Sometimes, late at night when I'm patrolling the mountain trails, I think I can still feel something watching me from the darkness. But it's not malevolent anymore. It's more like a guardian, making sure nothing else threatens the people under my protection. The tourists still love the swinging bridge, never knowing that it was the site of a battle between the supernatural and the human world. They take their pictures and talk about the beautiful view, and that's fine with me. Some stories are better left untold, but every now and then, when the moon is dark and the wind is just right, I hear something in the mountains that makes me check my grandfather's silver dirk. Because I learned something important during those terrible weeks in 1965. Monsters are real, but so are the people willing to fight them. And as long as there are MacLeods in these mountains, we'll be watching, just in case. My name is Dan Carpenter, and I've been a park ranger at Mount Mitchell State Park for 17 years. Before that, I spent 10 years in the Air Force, mostly working with radar equipment. I thought I'd seen everything the sky could throw at me. Storms that could tear a plane apart, lightning that could blind you for hours, even a few things the military told us never to talk about. Mount Mitchell is the highest peak east of the Mississippi River. It's a beautiful place, covered in thick forests that stretch for miles. The Cherokee people have stories about this mountain going back hundreds of years. They called it sacred, and they had legends about giant birds that lived in the high places. I always figured those were just old stories, the kind people tell around campfires. The mountain gets hit by lightning more than anywhere else in North Carolina. We've got radio towers up there, and they're always getting struck. The electromagnetic activity is so strong that compasses don't work right. Cell phones cut out. Even our park radios get fuzzy sometimes. I live in a cabin about 5 miles from the base of the mountain with my wife Sarah and our 2 kids, Emma and Jake. Sarah teaches at the elementary school in town, and the kids are always asking me about the animals I see while I'm working. Normal stuff: black bears, deer, the occasional wildcat. Nothing that would keep them awake at night. That changed in October of 1981. It started with the hikers. 3 different groups came down from the peak in the same week, all telling similar stories. They said they saw something big flying around the radio towers at night. Not a plane or a helicopter, something with wings. They described red eyes that glowed like brake lights, visible from miles away. I figured it was probably a large bird, maybe a great horned owl catching the light from the towers. We get them up there. Sometimes, and in the right conditions, their eyes can look pretty spooky. I wrote up reports and filed them away. Then I started finding the prints. I was checking the trail markers near the summit when I saw them in a patch of muddy ground. At first I thought they might be from a large bird that had landed. But these were different. They were huge. Each print was almost 2 feet long, with what looked like claw marks at the tips. The strange thing was how deep they were pressed into the mud, like whatever made them was incredibly heavy. I took pictures and measurements. I even made plaster casts. When I showed them to my partner, Lisa Reynolds, she just stared at them for a long time. Lisa has been a ranger for 9 years, and she studied birds in college. She knows more about flying creatures than anyone I've ever met. "Dan," she said finally, "I've never seen anything like this. The wingspan would have to be at least 15 feet, maybe more." "Could it be a turkey vulture?" I asked. "Maybe a really big one?" She shook her head. Turkey vultures don't have claws like this, and they don't weigh enough to make prints this deep. That night I called Marie Walking Stick. She's an elder in the Cherokee community and knows all the old stories about the mountain. I figured she might have heard something that could help us figure out what we were dealing with. "You found tracks near the sacred place," she said when I described what I'd seen. Her voice got very quiet. "The Tlanua is walking again." "The what?" "Giant bird. In the old stories, it comes before great sadness. It tries to warn people, but they don't always listen." I thanked her and hung up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just an old story. That night I had trouble sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept thinking about those deep tracks in the mud and the way Marie's voice had changed when she talked about the Tlanua. The next morning, I got a call from the state police. A hiker had gone missing near the summit. His name was Tom Bradley, and he'd been camping, alone for 3 days. His car was still in the parking lot, but there was no sign of him on the trails. Lisa and I organized a search party. We combed the mountain for hours, following every trail and checking every camping spot. We found his tent about half a mile from the radio towers. It was still set up, but Tom was nowhere to be found. Inside the tent, we found his journal. The last entry was from the night before he disappeared. "Something's been circling the camp for hours. I can hear wings, big ones, but I can't see anything in the dark. The red eyes are back. They're watching me write this. I think it wants me to follow it." We never found Tom Bradley. The search went on for a week, but it was like he'd just vanished into thin air. The state police finally called it off, figuring he'd fallen into a ravine or gotten lost in the thick woods. But I couldn't let it go. Something about that journal entry bothered me. Lisa and I started spending more time on the mountain, especially at night. We set up observation posts near the radio towers and took turns watching the sky. For 3 weeks, we saw nothing unusual, just the normal aircraft flying overhead and the occasional bat. Then, on a cold November night, everything changed. I was alone at the observation post, drinking coffee from a thermos and trying to stay warm. The fog was thick and I could barely see 10 feet in any direction. My radio was crackling with static. The electromagnetic interference was worse than usual. That's when I heard the wings. It wasn't like any bird I'd ever heard before. The sound was deep and powerful, like a helicopter blade cutting through the air. But there was something else too, a kind of whooshing noise that seemed to come from all directions at once. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it up into the fog. At first I didn't see anything, then the beam caught something too, so hat made my blood freeze. 2 red eyes, each about the size of a dinner plate, staring down at me from maybe 30 feet up. They weren't reflecting the light like animal eyes usually do. They were glowing on their own like hot coals in a fire. I tried to move, but my legs felt like concrete. Those eyes held me in place, and for a moment, I felt like I was looking into something that was older and smarter than anything I'd ever encountered. The creature, whatever it was, slowly descended through the fog. I could make out the shape of massive wings, at least 15 feet across, maybe more. The body was human-like, but larger, covered in dark feathers or fur. It landed on top of one of the radio towers with a heavy thud that I could feel through the ground. Then it spoke to me, not with words, but directly into my mind. I suddenly saw images, flashes of things that hadn't happened yet. A dam bursting, water rushing down the mountain, houses being swept away, people screaming. I saw faces I recognized, families from the towns below the mountain, my neighbor Bill Matthews, who worked at the hardware store, the Johnson family, who lived near the river, even my own family, running from rising water. The visions lasted only a few seconds, but they felt completely real. When they stopped, the creature was gone. I was alone on the mountain, shaking and trying to make sense of what I'd just experienced. I radioed Lisa immediately. "You need to get up here. Now." She arrived 20 minutes later with Dr. James Chen, a geologist from the university who sometimes consulted with the Park Service. I told them what I'd seen, including the visions. Dr. Chen looked skeptical, but Lisa was taking notes. The electromagnetic readings are off the charts, Dr. Chen said, checking his instruments. I've never seen anything like this. It's like something was generating a massive electrotus. Calfield. What about the visions? Lisa asked. The dam failing? Highland Dam is about 15 miles downstream, I said. It's been there since 1962. Provides water for 3 towns. Dr. Chen shook his head. That dam was built to last. It's inspected every year. There's no way it could just fail. But I couldn't get the images out of my head. I'd seen the water rushing down the mountain with my own eyes, even though it hadn't happened yet. I'd felt the terror of the people trying to escape. Over the next few days, the creature appeared several more times, always near the radio towers, always at night. Other rangers started seeing it too. Mike Rodriguez saw it perched on his truck one evening. Susan Walsh watched it fly circles around the visitor center for almost an hour. Each time someone had direct eye contact with the thing, they reported the same experience, visions of the dam failing and water flooding the valley below. The details were always the same. The crack starting at the base of the dam, the water pressure building, the catastrophic failure that would happen during a heavy rainstorm. I started calling it the Mothman, after the creature that had appeared in West Virginia back in the 1960s. The description was similar: large wings, red eyes, and the ability to predict disasters. Lisa did some research and found that the Highland Dam had been built quickly and cheaply. The construction company had cut corners, and there had been rumors of poor materials and shoddy workmanship. But the dam had been standing for 20 years without any problems. Maybe the creature is trying to warn us, she said one evening as we watched the towers from our observation post. Warn us about what? A dam that's been fine for 2 decades? I don't know, but every person who's seen this thing has had the same vision. That can't be a coincidence. She was right, but I didn't want to admit it. I'd been trained to deal with facts and evidence, not supernatural warnings about future disasters. The idea that something was trying to communicate with us through visions seemed impossible. Then Tom Bradley walked out of the woods. He appeared at the visitor center on a Tuesday morning looking confused and tired. He'd been missing for 3 weeks, but he seemed healthy. He had no memory of where he'd been or how he'd survived. I remember following the red eyes, he told us. They led me somewhere safe. I think I was supposed to see something. When we pressed him for details, he described the same visions we'd all been having: the dam failing, the flood, the people trying to escape. But he also remembered something else. It showed me the date, he said. December 15th. That's when it's going to happen. December 15th was 3 weeks away. I called the Highland Dam Authority the next morning. I spoke to the chief engineer, a man named Robert Paulson, who'd been working on dams for 30 years. I tried to explain the situation without mentioning the Mothman directly. We've had some reports about possible structural concerns with Highland Dam, I said. I was wondering if you could do an inspection. We just inspected it last month, Paulson replied. Everything checked out fine. What kind of concerns are we talking about? I couldn't tell him that a giant bird creature had shown multiple people visions of the dam failing. Instead, I said we'd noticed some unusual seismic activity in the area and thought it might be worth checking. I'll have a team take a look next week, he said finally. But next week might be too late. According to Tom Bradley, the disaster was going to happen on December 15th, and that was only 20 days away. The Mothman appearances became more frequent. It showed up almost every night now, always near the radio towers. Sometimes multiple rangers would see it at the same time. The visions were getting more detailed too. We could see the exact location where the dam would crack, the time of day when it would happen, even the weather conditions. Lisa started documenting everything. She interviewed every person who'd had contact with the creature and recorded their descriptions of the visions. The consistency was remarkable. Everyone saw the same thing, down to the smallest details. It's like the creature is broadcasting the same message to everyone, she said. But why? What does it want us to do about it? The answer came from Marie Walkingstick. I drove down to see her at her house near the Cherokee Reservation. She listened patiently as I described everything that had been happening. The Tlanua is a guardian spirit, she said when I finished. In the old stories, it appears before disasters to warn the people, but it can only show them what's coming. It can't prevent it directly. The people have to act on the warning. But how do we get anyone to believe us? We can't just tell the authorities that a giant bird showed us visions. Marie smiled. The Tlanua is wise. It will find a way to make them listen. That night, the creature made its most dramatic appearance yet. Instead of staying near the radio towers, it flew directly over the town of Burnsville, about 10 miles from the dam. Dozens of people saw it. Families eating dinner, kids playing outside, even the police chief who was driving home from work. But this time, the Mothman didn't just show visions to people who made direct eye contact. Everyone in town had the same dream that night, the dam failing, the water rushing down the valley, their homes and businesses being destroyed. By morning, the phone at the park office was ringing constantly. People were scared and confused. They wanted to know what the giant bird was and why they'd all had the same nightmare. The local newspaper ran a story about the mass hysteria in Burnsville. The reporter interviewed several witnesses, including a Methodist minister who said the dream felt more real than anything he'd ever experienced. More importantly, the story caught the attention of some engineers at the state level, and they started asking questions about Highland Dam, wondering if there might be some real structural problems that were causing people to have anxiety dreams about flooding. The dam authority agreed to do a more thorough inspection. They brought in a team with ground-penetrating radar and other advanced equipment. What they found made everyone very nervous. There were hairline cracks in the concrete, much worse than anyone had suspected. The dam wasn't going to fail tomorrow, but it was definitely compromised. With enough water pressure, like during a heavy rainstorm, it could catastrophically collapse. "We need to start emergency repairs immediately," Robert Paulson told the county commissioners. "This dam is more dangerous than we realized." But emergency repairs would take months, and the Weather Service was predicting heavy rains for the middle of December. The Mothman seemed to sense that its message was finally getting through. Its appearances became less frequent, but more targeted. It started showing up near the offices of local officials, perching on their cars and houses. Anyone who worked for the dam authority, the county government, or emergency services was likely to have a close encounter. Dr. Chen had been monitoring the electromagnetic activity around the mountain, and he noticed something interesting. The energy spikes always happened right before the creature appeared, almost like it was announcing itself. "It's manipulating electrical fields somehow," he told us. "The readings are unlike anything in the scientific literature." Lisa had her own theory. "I think it exists partially in our dimension and partially in another one. That's why it can see future events. Time might work differently wherever it comes from." The military got involved when the Mothman started interfering with aircraft. A National Guard helicopter was doing a routine training flight near the mountain when both engines suddenly failed. The pilot managed to make an emergency landing, but when the mechanics checked the helicopter, they couldn't find anything wrong with the engines. "It was like something just turned them off," the pilot reported. "All the electrical systems went dead for about 30 seconds, then came back online." Similar incidents happened with 3 more aircraft over the next week. The FAA issued a temporary flight restriction around Mount Mitchell, but that only brought more attention to the situation. A team of Air Force investigators arrived to look into the electromagnetic anomalies affecting aircraft. I recognized some of the equipment they brought. It was the same type of radar gear I'd worked with during my service. They were taking this very seriously. Major Patricia Williams was leading the investigation. I decided to tell her the full truth about what we'd been experiencing, including the creature's warnings about the dam. "Ranger Carpenter," she said after I finished my report, "I've read your military file. You were involved in some classified projects during your Air Force career. You understand that some phenomena can't be explained with conventional science." "Yes, ma'am." "We have reports of similar entities appearing before major disasters throughout history. Usually they're dismissed as folklore or mass hysteria, but the electromagnetic signatures we're detecting here are consistent with other unexplained events." She showed me satellite images of the area around Mount Mitchell. There were heat signatures and energy patterns that didn't match anything natural. The creature was definitely real, and it was definitely not from this world. "The question is, what does it want?" Major Williams asked. "To save lives," I said. "It's trying to prevent a disaster that will kill hundreds of people." 3 days later, the Weather Service upgraded their forecast. A massive storm system was heading for western North Carolina, and it was expected to arrive on December 14th, one day before the date in the Mothman's vision. The storm hit on schedule. By the morning of December 14th, we'd already had 4 inches of rain, and it was coming down harder every hour. The Highland Dam was holding, but the water level was rising fast. I was at the emergency command center they'd set up in the town hall, monitoring radio communications and weather reports. Lisa was with me, along with Major Williams and her team. The Air Force had brought in sophisticated monitoring equipment to track both the storm and the electromagnetic anomalies. "The dam's at 85% capacity," reported one of the engineers. "If the rain keeps up at this rate, we'll reach critical levels by tonight." Robert Paulson was coordinating with the repair crews who were trying to reinforce the dam's weak spots. It was dangerous work in the storm, but they didn't have a choice. If the dam failed, it would send a wall of water down the valley that would destroy 3 towns and kill everyone who couldn't get to higher ground in time. "Evacuation plans are ready," said Sheriff Martinez. "But moving 30,000 people in this weather, it's going to be chaos." That's when the electromagnetic readings went crazy. "Contact!" shouted Sergeant Davis, one of Major Williams's technicians. Massive energy signature approaching from the north. Through the rain and wind, we could see a dark shape flying toward the town. It was the Mothman, but it looked different now, larger, more solid, like it was putting more of itself into our dimension. It landed on the roof of the town hall with enough force to shake the building. We could hear its claws scraping against the metal as it moved around up there. Then it did something it had never done before. It began to communicate with all of us at the same time. The vision hit everyone in the command center simultaneously. We saw the dam from above, like we were flying over it. The crack was starting to form exactly where the creature had predicted, spreading from the base of the structure up toward the spillway. But this time, the vision didn't stop there. The Mothman showed us what would happen minute by minute. The crack spreading, the water pressure building, the catastrophic failure that would come at 11:47 p.m. We also saw the evacuation, cars trying to flee on roads that were already flooded, families trapped in their homes as the water rose, rescue workers swept away by the current. It was going to be a disaster no matter what we did. Unless the final part of the vision showed us something new. The Mothman itself, flying directly into the dam's electrical systems. Its electromagnetic abilities could overload the spillway controls, forcing them to open fully and release water in a controlled manner before the structure failed completely. But the vision also showed us the cost. The electrical discharge required to override the dam's systems would destroy the creature. It was offering to sacrifice itself to save the people in the valley. "We have to evacuate now," Major Williams said as soon as the vision ended. "All 3 towns, immediately." "In this storm," Sheriff Martinez protested, "it'll be chaos. People will die in the panic." "More people will die if that dam fails," I said. "The creature is giving us a chance to save them." The decision was made to begin emergency evacuations at 6 p.m., 5.5 hours before the predicted dam failure. It would be the largest emergency evacuation in North Carolina history, all based on the warnings of a supernatural entity. As the evacuation began, I drove back up to Mount Mitchell. I needed to see the Mothman one more time to thank it for what it was about to do. I found it perched on the radio tower where I'd first seen it. The red eyes were brighter now, almost blinding in their intensity. When it looked at me, I felt a wave of emotion that wasn't my own, ancient sadness mixed with fierce determination. It showed me one final vision, nay, out of disaster, but of the future that would come after. The valley rebuilt, the people safe, new generations who would grow up because of this creature's sacrifice. It also showed me my role. I would be the one to tell their story, to make sure people remembered what had happened here. The creature spread its wings and took flight for the last time. I watched it soar through the storm toward Highland Dam, 15 miles away. Lightning flashed around it like it was calling the electricity to itself. At 11:47 p.m., every light in 3 counties went out at once. The official report blamed the Highland Dam failure on unprecedented weather conditions and previously undetected structural weaknesses. They said the spillway systems malfunctioned due to lightning strikes, causing them to open fully just minutes before the main structure would have collapsed. The controlled release prevented the catastrophic flood the Mothman had shown us in its visions. Instead of a sudden wall of water destroying everything in its path, the excess water flowed out slowly over several hours. Some roads were flooded and a few buildings were damaged, but no one died. 30,000 people spent that night in emergency shelters, complaining about being forced from their homes based on computer models and weather predictions. They didn't know how close they'd come to losing everything. Major Williams classified all reports about the Mothman encounters. As far as the government was concerned, the evacuation was a routine response to legitimate engineering concerns about the dam. The electromagnetic anomalies were attributed to unusual atmospheric conditions during the storm. But some of us know the truth. Marie Walkingstick told me that the Cherokee people would remember the Tlanua's sacrifice in their ceremonies. The mountain spirit gave its life to save the valley people, she said. This story will be told for generations. Lisa left the Park Service 6 months later to become a freelance researcher studying unexplained phenomena. She's documented similar protective entities appearing before disasters all across the Appalachian Mountains. Her work isn't accepted by mainstream science, but it's helped save lives in several small communities. As for me, I'm still a ranger at Mount Mitchell State Park. But something changed that night when I made direct contact with the Mothman. I can sense when bad weather is coming days before it shows up on satellite. I know when hikers are in trouble before they send distress signals. The other rangers joke that I have a sixth sense, but they trust my instincts. Every year on December 15th, I climb up to the radio towers and spend the night watching the sky. I've never seen the red eyes again, but sometimes I feel like I'm being watched by something that cares about the safety of the people in these mountains. The Highland Dam was rebuilt with better materials and modern safety features. The new structure is supposed to last for 100 years. But if anything like the Mothman ever appears near it again, I hope the people in charge will have the wisdom to listen. My kids are grown now, with children of their own. Emma became a meteorologist, and Jake works for the Emergency Management Agency. Both of them inherited some of my sensitivity to approaching disasters. They think it runs in the family, and maybe they're right. But I know the truth. The Mothman's sacrifice created a connection between our family and the mountain. We're part of its protection system now, trained to recognize the signs of coming danger and help people prepare. Sometimes, late at night when the fog rolls in thick around the radio towers, I think I can hear the sound of massive wings cutting through the air. It's probably just the wind, but it makes me feel like the mountain is still being watched over. Some guardians have wings, some have warnings, and the wise listen to both. The people of western North Carolina learned that lesson in December of 1981, even if they don't remember exactly how. And up here on Mount Mitchell, we're still listening, still watching, still ready to pass along whatever warnings come our way. Because you never know when something that loves this mountain more than its own existence might need to speak through us again. My name is Daniel Crowfoot, but most folks call me Danny. I've been a park ranger in Jefferson National Forest for 13 years now. And in all that time, I thought I'd seen every way these mountains could hurt you. Bears, snakes, flash floods, rock slides. Name it, I've dealt with it. But what happened in Bone Hollow back in October of '73 changed everything I thought I knew about these ancient hills. I'm Cherokee on my grandfather's side, Scots-Irish on my grandmother's. Third-generation Appalachian, born and raised in these mountains. My grandfather, Joseph Crowfoot, used to tell me stories about the old places, caves and hollows where the Cherokee wouldn't hunt, wouldn't even speak about except in whispers. "The rocks are hungry there, Danny," he'd say, tapping his carved elk bone flute. Some places remember things that should stay buried. Of course, after Korea and 13 years of ranger work, I figured those were just stories old folks told to keep kids from wandering off. Mountains are dangerous enough without adding ghost tales to the mix. I was 37 then, divorced. My ex-wife couldn't handle the isolation of mountain life. Lived alone in a ranger cabin 8 miles from the nearest road. Saw my daughter Sarah every other weekend when I could make the drive to Troutdale. Missing 2 fingers on my left hand from a chainsaw accident my 3rd year on the job. But that never slowed me down much. October 28, 1973, started like any other day. Cold morning, about 28 degrees, with frost thick on the cabin windows. I was drinking coffee and checking my gear when the radio crackled to life at 6:47 a.m. Ranger 7, this is Base. We've got a missing hiker. I keyed the handset. Base, this is Ranger 7. Go ahead. 24-year-old female, Sarah Beth Williams, Virginia Tech geology student. Vehicle located at Bone Hollow Trailhead. Keys still in ignition. Due. Back yesterday evening. Bone Hollow. I felt something cold settle in my stomach that had nothing to do with the morning air. Copy, Base. How long overdue? 12 hours. Weather's turning cold fast. Need you to start search immediately. Roger. Beginning search operations, Bone Hollow sector. I gathered my gear, headlamp, manila rope, first aid kit, emergency flares, and my grandfather's elk bone flute. Don't ask me why I always carried that old thing. Force of habit, I guess. Threw it all in my '71 Ford Bronco and headed for Bone Hollow. The drive took 40 minutes on winding mountain roads. Fog was rolling up from the hollow like smoke from a grave, which should have been my first warning. But I'd seen plenty of morning fog in 13 years. Didn't think much of it then. Sarah's car sat at the trailhead, a beat-up Volkswagen Beetle with Virginia plates. I checked inside. Camping gear in the back seat, geological survey maps on the dashboard, thermos half full of cold coffee. Girl had come prepared for a serious hike. I shouldered my pack and started up the trail. Standard search protocol, quarter-mile grid sections marking my path with orange flagging tape every 50 feet. The trail was well marked for the first mile, then became little more than deer paths winding through thick forest. That's when I noticed the silence. In 13 years of walking these mountains, I'd never heard quiet like this. No bird calls, no squirrel chatter, no insect buzz. Even the wind seemed muted. I stopped walking and just listened for a full minute. Nothing. Dead quiet, like the whole forest was holding its breath. My radio crackled with static. Base, this is Ranger 7, beginning grid search 1 mile from trailhead. More static then. Copy, Ranger 7. Report every hour. Found her backpack at the 1.3 mile mark. Contents scattered across the trail. Water bottle, granola, bars, field notebook, geology hammer. No signs of a struggle, just looked like she'd dropped everything and kept walking. That was unusual. Experienced hikers don't abandon their gear, especially not their water. I documented everything in my field notebook, then kept following the trail. Her boot prints were clear in the soft mud from recent rain. Size 7 hiking boots with a distinctive waffle pattern on the sole. Easy to track. Then 50 yards past her backpack, the prints just stopped. Mid-stride, like she'd vanished into thin air. I knelt down, studying the ground. The mud was perfect for tracking, soft enough to show every detail. Her left boot print was clear as day, full depth, showing she'd been walking at normal speed. Then nothing. No right footprint, no drag marks, no blood, no disturbed vegetation. 13 years of tracking, and I'd never seen anything like it. I spent an hour in that spot, searching every inch of ground in expanding circles. The boot prints ended like she'd stepped off the edge of the world. Professional training kicked in. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe she'd jumped to avoid a snake, landed on a rock outcrop, backtracked along the same path. But I couldn't find any evidence of that. My radio crackled. Ranger 7, hourly check. Base, found hiker's pack and initial tracks, but trail goes cold at 1.8 miles. Continuing search pattern. Copy. Weather front moving in. Temperature dropping to 15 degrees tonight. That meant I had maybe 6 hours to find Sarah before hypothermia became a real threat. I pushed deeper into Bone Hollow, following the main trail that wound down into the valley between two ridges. The deeper I went, the wronger everything felt. My compass needle started spinning slowly, like it couldn't decide which way was north. Fresh batteries in my headlamp, but the beam kept getting dimmer. And my watch, a digital Timex I'd bought just last month, kept flickering between the correct time and 3:33 a.m. The temperature was dropping too, but not gradual like normal mountain weather. I'd feel normal October warmth for 50 yards, then walk into pockets of air so cold I could see my breath. No wind, no weather patterns that would explain it. Just random cold zones that made no sense, and still no birds, no insects, no life sounds at all. I found the first dead circle at the 2-mile mark. Perfect ring of dead vegetation, about 12 feet across. Grass brown and brittle, trees leafless and bark peeling. But the weird thing was, the soil wasn't hot like it should be from some kind of burn. It was cold, colder than the surrounding ground. I took pictures with my backup camera. Main one had stopped working for no reason I could figure. Then I found another dead circle 50 yards further on. Then another. They formed a rough line leading deeper into the hollow, toward the limestone caves I knew were somewhere in this area. That's when I realized I hadn't seen any wildlife signs since entering the hollow. No deer tracks, no rabbit droppings, no claw marks on trees. Even the spider webs were empty. It was like every living thing had decided to avoid this place. My grandfather's voice echoed in my memory. Some places remember things that should stay buried. I shook it off. Sarah was somewhere out here. Probably injured. Definitely cold. Ghost stories wouldn't help her. The trail curved around a massive limestone outcrop, and that's where I found the first bone arrangement. A complete deer skeleton, laid out in a perfect spiral pattern. Every bone clean and white, positioned with deliberate precision. The skull at the center, ribs forming concentric circles, leg bones radiating outward like spokes of a wheel. This wasn't natural predation. No scavenger arranges bones like that. No natural process creates geometric patterns. I sketched it in my field notebook, trying to stay professional, trying to focus on facts. But my hands were shaking, and not from cold. Following the bone trail, because that's what it was, I realized, a trail of arranged animal skeletons, led me to a cave entrance I'd never seen before. And I'd surveyed this area 6 times in 13 years. Natural limestone arch about 12 feet high and perfectly rounded. Cherokee petroglyphs carved around the entrance, symbols I half remembered from my grandfather's teachings. The cave should have been on my maps. A system this size should be documented, regulated, marked with warning signs. But there it was, like it had just appeared. From somewhere deep inside, I heard a voice calling for help. Female, young, desperate. "Help me, please! Someone help me!" Sarah. I checked my gear one more time. Carbide helmet lamp, manila rope, first aid kit, emergency flares, cave rescue protocol. I'd done this 47 times before, never lost anyone. "Base, this is Ranger 7, I radioed, but got only static. The hollow was a dead zone for radio communication, something about the mineral deposits in the rock. I was on my own. The voice called again, fainter now, from deep in the cave system. I clipped my rope to a sturdy oak tree, tested the knot twice, and started down into the darkness. The cave swallowed my headlamp beam like hungry darkness. Temperature dropped 20 degrees the moment I stepped inside. Limestone walls covered in centuries of mineral deposits, formations that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. But something about this place felt wrong, felt old, felt angry. My footsteps echoed for seconds in the perfect acoustics, every sound amplified, distorted. I marked my path with reflective tape every 50 feet, standard cave procedure. Don't get lost underground. First rule of rescue work. "Sarah," I called. "Sarah Williams, can you hear me?" My voice bounced back from a dozen different directions, creating an echo that sounded like multiple people calling her name. The acoustics were all wrong for a normal cave system. 50 yards in, I found her hiking boots, placed neatly on a limestone shelf like she'd sat to, owned to rest, and carefully removed them. No mud, no scuff marks, just sitting there in perfect condition. Another 50 yards, her jacket, folded precisely on another rocky ledge. Then her socks, still damp with sweat. Items placed with the same deliberate care as those bone spirals outside. Barefoot prints in the cave mud led deeper into the system. "Sarah!" I called again. "I'm a park ranger. I'm here to help." Her voice came from 3 different directions at once. "Down here! I can't move! Please help me!" That's not how cave acoustics work. Sound doesn't split like that, doesn't come from multiple sources simultaneously. But I could hear the desperation in her voice, real terror. She was alive, and she needed help. I followed the barefoot prints deeper into the cave complex. The system was huge, passages branching in every direction, chambers opening into more chambers. This should have been mapped years ago. Should have had safety railings, guided tours, the whole Park Service treatment. In the deepest chamber, I found them. Ancient Cherokee burial sites. Human skeletons arranged in complex geometric patterns, the same spirals I'd seen outside but made with human bones. Some looked centuries old, others much more recent. All arranged with that same careful precision. And in the center of the largest spiral, I found Sarah, sitting perfectly still in a lotus position, surrounded by a perfect circle of human arm bones, alive but completely unresponsive to my voice or touch. Her eyes were open but seeing nothing, like she was in some kind of trance. The arm bones around her were glowing with a faint phosphorescent light. I reached to grab her, shake her awake, get her out of there. The moment my hand crossed into the circle, the bones rose up and reformed into a cage structure around her. No human force moving them. They just moved. That's when I saw it. A figure, moving through the solid rock wall. 9 feet tall, elongated limbs like a stretched-out human shadow. Its skin was translucent gray, and I could see the skeletal structure underneath. Ancient intelligence in hollow eye sockets. It moved through the limestone like it was water. I fumbled for my grandfather's elk bone flute. Don't know why. Instinct, maybe. Heritage memory. The creature paused when it heard the first notes of the Cherokee ritual song my grandfather had taught me. The scattered human bones throughout the chamber began to glow brighter. Then they started moving, sliding across the cave floor toward the creature. Femurs reformed into spear-like weapons. Ribs wove together into shields. Skulls aligned in defensive formations. The creature was using the bones as tools, as weapons, as building materials. It began moving its own bones, finger bones, I think, in the cave dirt. Spelling out Cherokee symbols I half remembered. Guardian. Harvest. Ancient Pact. I tried to speak in Cherokee, using the few phrases my grandfather had taught me. The creature acknowledged my heritage but kept manipulating the bones. More symbols in the dirt. Broken promise. Hungry rocks. Payment due. That's when I understood what my grandfather had been trying to tell me all those years. This wasn't just a creature, it was a guardian. And the Cherokee had made a pact with it centuries ago. Feed it willing volunteers, and it would protect the tribe from other supernatural threats. The bones it collected weren't trophies. They were components in some ancient ritual, building blocks for barriers between our world and something worse. But the pact had been broken when the Cherokee were forced from their lands. No more volunteers, no more sacred agreements. So it had started hunting. A sound like rockfall echoed from the cave entrance. The creature had sealed us in. My carbide flame was getting weaker as oxygen levels dropped. My watch showed 3:33 a.m. even though I'd entered the cave at noon. And Sarah was still trapped in that glowing bone cage, completely catatonic, while the creature prepared to add her skeleton to its ancient collection. I was looking at the guardian my grandfather's people had both feared and respected for 800 years. And I was Cherokee enough that it might listen to me. Cherokee enough to renew the pact. But that would mean sacrificing Sarah to save future victims, or finding another way to honor an ancient agreement that my people had made long before I was born. The creature raised a bone spear, pointing it at Sarah's heart. The phosphorescent glow intensified. Time was up. I played my grandfather's flute with shaking hands. The Cherokee ritual song echoed through the chamber, and the bone weapons hovering around the creature wavered, their formation disrupted by the ancient melody. The guardian stopped advancing towards Sarah, its hollow eye sockets fixed on me, ancient intelligence calculating. It moved more finger bones in the dirt. You know the old songs. I am Cherokee, I said in my grandfather's language, the words feeling strange after years of disuse. Grandson of Joseph Crowfoot, keeper of the bone flute, singer of the guardian songs. The pact was broken, the creature spelled out. The promise forgotten, the barrier weakens. I was beginning to understand. This wasn't just about collecting bones for some twisted purpose. The creature was trying to maintain something, a supernatural barrier that had protected both Cherokee and white settlers for centuries. Without the ancient pact, without willing sacrifices, that barrier was failing, and things far worse than bone guardians were pressing against it from the other side. The Cherokee were forced from these lands, I said. The old ways were forbidden. The promises couldn't be kept. The hungry rocks grow restless, it replied. The bone paths must be maintained. She will complete the pattern. The bone cage around Sarah begged, and to constrict. The phosphorescent glow was pulling something from her. Her life force, maybe, or her soul. Her breathing was getting shallow. I had seconds to make a choice that would haunt me forever. Take me instead, I said. The creature paused. Bone fragments spelled, "You are blood of the pact makers?" I rolled up my sleeve, showing the Cherokee tattoo my grandfather had given me when I turned 18. Traditional symbols that marked me as a member of the Wolf Clan. The creature studied the markings with obvious recognition. I offer myself as willing sacrifice to renew the ancient agreement, I said formally, remembering the phrases my grandfather had taught me for speaking to spirits. My bones for hers, my death for the continuation of the barrier. The bone weapons turned toward me, points gleaming in the phosphorescent light. But the creature seemed to be considering my offer. More symbols appeared in the dirt. One bone gift, one sacrifice. The pact renewed for 7 seasons. 7 years. 7 years of protection in exchange for one life. But as the bone spears moved closer, I realized there might be another way. A way my grandfather might have understood. Wait, I said, still playing the flute. The old pact was Cherokee for Cherokee. But I am Cherokee and white. My bones carry both bloodlines. The creature paused again. What if the pact could be different? What if instead of death, you took a piece of my life? A piece I offer willingly? I held up my left hand, the one missing 2 fingers from the chainsaw accident. You have fed on Cherokee bones for 800 years. Feed on Cherokee blood willingly given, and the barrier can be maintained without murder. The creature moved closer, studying my maimed hand with intense interest. Then it reached out with claws like black obsidian and drew them across my palm. Not cutting deep, just deep enough to draw blood that glowed the same phosphorescent blue as the bones around Sarah. The moment my blood hit the cave floor, the bone cage around Sarah dissolved. She collapsed, unconscious. I was but breathing normally. The creature absorbed the glowing blood into its translucent skin. The pact is renewed, it spelled in the dirt. 7 seasons, 7 blood gifts. The barrier holds. The cave entrance rumbled open. Fresh air rushed in, making my carbide flame burn brighter. The creature faded back into the limestone walls, but not before spelling one final message. Guardian Crowfoot, the old ways remember. I gathered Sarah in my arms. She was ice cold but alive, and carried her toward the entrance. Behind us, the bone arrangements began to glow brighter, forming new patterns I didn't recognize. The ancient barrier repairing itself with Cherokee blood and renewed purpose. We stumbled out of the cave into late afternoon sunlight. My watch showed the correct time again. My radio crackled back to life. Ranger 7, this is base. Report status. Base, missing hiker located and secured. Need medical evacuation for hypothermia. 2 souls coming out of Bone Hollow. But I'd left something down there in the dark, something I could feel bleeding away with each heartbeat. The creature hadn't just taken my blood. It had taken a piece of my life, my connection to the natural world. I could feel the mountains differently now, could sense things moving in the shadows that hadn't been there before. I was guardian now, keeper of an ancient pact. And I had 6 more years to figure out what that meant. The helicopter found us on the ridge above Bone Hollow just as the sun was setting. Sarah was unconscious from severe hypothermia, but her vital signs were stable. They airlifted her to the regional medical center while I rode back with the ground team. Medical examination showed I'd lost 15 pounds in 1 day. My hair had gone completely gray, and I had a tremor in my hands that wouldn't go away. The doctors called it severe stress reaction and exposure. They had no idea about the supernatural drain I'd experienced or the piece of my life force now feeding an ancient barrier between worlds. Sarah recovered completely but remembered nothing after entering the cave system. The official report listed her case as successful rescue from undocumented geological formation. The cave entrance couldn't be located by the geological survey team that came out the following week, like it had never existed. But I knew better. I could still feel it calling to me during the dark hours, reminding me of the pact I'd made. Every new moon, the pull got stronger. The Forest Service commended me for the rescue and designated Bone Hollow as geologically unstable, closing it to public access. They rerouted the trail to avoid the area entirely. No more missing hikers in that sector. I continued my ranger work for another 22 years, but I avoided Bone Hollow except when the Pact demanded it. Every year on the anniversary of the incident, I'd hike back to where the cave entrance appeared and offer a few drops of blood to maintain the ancient agreement. The barrier held. No more unexplained disappearances in Jefferson National Forest. But the cost was higher than I'd expected. The supernatural connection changed me. I could sense things moving in the deep forest that weren't natural. Could hear voices calling from caves that led to nowhere. Could see the places where reality wore thin, where older things pressed against the boundaries of our world. I started studying Cherokee rituals, reconnected with relatives I'd lost touch with. Learned the old songs and stories my grandfather had tried to teach me. The tribal elders acknowledged what I'd done, called me Bridgewalker, someone who moved between the world of the living and the world of spirits. Found out there were others like me scattered throughout the Appalachians, rangers and wardens and mountain folk who'd encountered things that couldn't be explained, who'd made their own pacts with ancient guardians to keep worse things at bay. We looked out for each other, shared information about supernatural hotspots, warned each other when the barriers were weakening. Sarah Beth Williams became an archaeologist specializing in Native American sites. She never remembered what happened in Bone Hollow, but something about the experience changed her path in life. She spent her career documenting sacred places, preserving cultural heritage, protecting sites from development and destruction. Like some part of her remembered the importance of keeping ancient agreements. I retired in 1995, but I still monitor Bone Hollow. The creature, my creature now, I suppose, honors the pact. The cave entrance appears only during new moon phases, and only I can find it. Other hikers pass right by without seeing anything unusual. But the supernatural activity in the Appalachians has been increasing. Climate change, mining operations, and development are disturbing places that have been undisturbed for centuries. Ancient pacts are being broken by people who don't know they exist, and the barriers between worlds are getting thinner. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd chosen differently that day in Bone Hollow. If I'd let the creature take Sarah and maintain the old ways. Would the barrier be stronger? Would other supernatural sites be more stable? But then I remember her voice calling for help, the terror in it, and I know I made the right choice. Some costs are worth paying. Some responsibilities are worth accepting. If you're planning to hike the Appalachian Mountains, especially the cave systems, remember this. Respect the old warnings. When the Cherokee marked a place as sacred or dangerous, they had good reasons. If you find perfect bone arrangements, if your electronics fail for no reason, if you hear voices calling from multiple directions at once, get out immediately. The mountains are older than we are. They remember everything. And some. Of the things they remember are still down there in the dark, waiting for the ancient agreements to fail. waiting for their chance to come back to the light. My name is Bill Granger, and I've been a forest ranger for 21 years. Before that, I spent 3 years in the Vietnam jungle with special forces. I thought I knew what dangerous looked like. I thought I'd seen everything that could hide in the woods and hunt you. I was wrong. It started in the summer of 1973, down in Jefferson National Forest in southwest Virginia. There's a place called Fern Cove, way back in the deep woods where most folks don't go. Old logging camps from the 1920s sit empty there, and caves wind through the hills like a maze. During the Civil War, Union deserters hid in those caves. The local folks always had stories about wild men living back there, but I figured they were just tales. The Forest Service paired me with Carol Mitchell that summer. She'd been a ranger for 8 years and spent her free time studying old mountain stories. Carol was smart, had a degree in anthropology, and could tell you more about Appalachian folklore than anyone I knew. "Bill," she said one morning, spreading out reports on my desk, "we've got a problem in Fern Cove." 3 families living near the cove had called in the same story. Something big was stealing food from their gardens and chicken coops. Not bears. Bears make a mess and eat everything. This thing took only what it needed and left the rest neat and tidy. But the footprints it left behind were 18 inches long and looked almost human. "Could be a hoax," I said, but Carol shook her head. "Mrs. Henderson has been living up there for 60 years. She's not the type to make things up, and her granddaughter saw it 2 nights ago." That got my attention. 8-year-old Sarah Henderson was staying with her grandmother for the summer. According to the report, she'd seen something huge walk past the window on 2 legs. When her grandmother checked the next morning, they found those massive footprints all around the house. "We need to check this out," Carol said. "If there's really something out there, those families are in danger." I packed my gear the way I learned in the Army, everything I might need to track something dangerous. My rifle, first aid kit, rope, and my old Vietnam field glasses. The woods of Virginia might be different from the jungles I knew, but hunting was hunting. We drove out to Fern Cove on a Tuesday morning. The trees grew thick there, old growth that blocked out most of the sun. Even in summer, the air felt cool and damp. Something about the place made me uneasy, though I couldn't say why. Maybe it was how quiet everything was. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering, just silence. Mrs. Henderson met us at her cabin door. She was a tiny woman with white hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "Thank goodness you're here," she said. "It came back last night." She led us around her house, pointing out the tracks. I knelt down and studied them. In all my years of tracking, I'd never seen anything like it. The prints looked almost human, but way too big. The stride was at least 4 feet long. Whatever made these tracks was huge and walked on 2 legs. "Did you see it?" Carol asked. Mrs. Henderson nodded. "Just a shadow moving past the kitchen window. But I could tell it was tall, taller than any man. And the smell," she wrinkled her nose, "like a wet dog that's been rolling in dead fish." We followed the tracks into the woods. They led straight toward the old logging camp about a mile deeper in the forest. The trail was easy to follow at first. Broken branches, disturbed leaves, deep prints in the soft ground. But as we got closer to the camp, something strange happened. The tracks just stopped. "That's impossible," I said, looking around. We were standing in a clearing with soft dirt on all sides. The tracks led right to the middle and via us. Neshed. Carol was studying the ground with a magnifying glass. "Bill, look at this." The dirt had been swept smooth with a branch covering the tracks, but you could still see the pattern if you looked close enough. Whatever made those prints was smart enough to hide its trail. "It knows we're following," I said, feeling that old familiar chill from my Army days. "It's thinking ahead." We spent the rest of the day searching the area but found nothing else. As we walked back to the truck, Carol was quiet, thinking hard. "Bill," she finally said, "what if those old stories are true? What if there really is something living back here?" I didn't answer, but I was thinking the same thing. 21 years in these woods, and I'd never seen anything like this. Whatever was out there, it was big, smart, and careful. And it was watching the families around Fern Cove. That night I lay awake thinking about those tracks. In Vietnam, we learned to respect an enemy that could think and plan. This felt the same way, like something was studying us while we tried to study it. I just didn't know yet how right I was. The next morning, Carol called me before sunrise. "It hit the Morrison farm," she said. "You need to see this." I drove out there fast. The Morrison place sat on the edge of the cove where the trees met their cornfield. Tom Morrison was waiting for us by his barn, holding a cup of coffee with shaky hands. "Happened around midnight," he said. "Something got into my chicken coop." But when we looked, the coop wasn't destroyed like a fox or coyote would do. The door had been carefully opened, not broken, opened. 3 chickens were missing, but the rest were unharmed. And there were those same huge footprints all around the building. "Tom," Carol said gently, "did you see anything?" He nodded slowly. "I heard the chickens making noise and came out with my shotgun. There was something by the coop, something big. When my flashlight hit it, I saw—" He stopped and shook his head. "You'll think I'm crazy." "Try us," I said. It was like a man, but wrong. Too tall, wide across the shoulders, covered in dark hair from head to toe, and the eyes— He shuddered. They reflected the light like an animal's, but they looked smart, like it was thinking. Carol and I walked around the coop, studying everything. The thing had approached from the woods, walking upright the whole way. The footprints showed it had stood still by the coop for several minutes before opening the door. "Look at this," Carol said, pointing to the door latch. It was a simple hook-and-eye setup, nothing complicated. But it would take human-like hands to work it, and intelligence to figure out how. We followed the tracks back into the woods. This time, they led us deeper than before, toward the old logging camp. The forest got thicker and darker as we went. I kept my rifle ready and watched the shadows. "There," Carol whispered, pointing ahead. Through the trees, we could see the ruins of the logging camp. Old wooden buildings, half collapsed and overgrown with vines. But one of them looked different. Someone, or something, had been fixing it up. We crept closer, using the trees for cover. The largest building had new logs wedged into gaps in the walls. Branches and leaves had been woven together to make a crude roof. It looked like a shelter, but built by something that only half understood human construction. "Should we go in?" Carol whispered. Before I could answer, we heard it. A low rumbling sound from inside the building, like a giant dog growling, but deeper, more powerful. The hair on my arms stood up. Then something moved in the doorway. I saw it for maybe 3 seconds before it disappeared back inside. Tall as a basketball player, but twice as wide, covered in dark brown fur that looked almost black. The face was like a cross between a man and an ape, with intelligent eyes that locked onto mine across the clearing. We stared at each other for those 3 seconds. Then it was gone, vanishing into the darkness of the building like smoke. My hands were shaking as I raised my rifle. "Did you see—" "I saw it," Carol breathed. "My God, Bill, I saw it." We waited for 10 minutes, but nothing else happened. The forest around us had gone completely silent, like everything was holding its breath. Finally, we backed away slowly, keeping our eyes on the building until we couldn't see it anymore. "We need help," I said once we reached the truck, but Carol shook her head. "Who's going to believe us? And what if they send in a bunch of people with guns? That thing didn't attack us. It could have, but it didn't." She was right. The creature had been close enough to grab us both, but it just watched, almost like it was curious about what we were doing. "We need to learn more," Carol said. "I'm going to research everything I can find about creatures like this, and we need to talk to more of the local families. If this thing has been around for a while, someone will know something." That evening, we visited old Henry Watts, who'd lived in the area his whole life. He was 92 and sharp as a tack. When we described what we'd seen, he just nodded. "Yep, they're back," he said calmly. "Haven't seen one in maybe 20 years, but my granddaddy used to tell stories. Called them the wild folk. Said they lived in the deep caves and only came out when they needed something." "They?" Carol asked. Henry nodded. "Always more than one. Family groups usually. Smart as people, but stronger. My granddaddy said they helped folks during the Depression, left food for families that were starving, fixed broken fences, that sort of thing. But they kept to themselves mostly." "Why haven't we heard about this before?" I asked. Henry smiled. "City folks wouldn't believe it. And we mountain people, we know when to keep quiet about things. Live and let live, you know?" As we drove home, Carol was excited. "Bill, this could be the discovery of the century. An unknown primate species living in North America. Intelligent, tool-using. But I was thinking about those eyes. The way the creature had looked at me. There was something there. Not just animal intelligence, but awareness. It knew we were different from the local families it had been watching. It knew we were a threat. And that worried me more than I wanted to admit." The next morning, Mrs. Henderson called again. This time, her voice was shaking. "It took Sarah," she said. We raced to Mrs. Henderson's house, my heart pounding the whole way. When we got there, she was sitting on her porch with tears streaming down her face. She was playing by the creek, the old woman said. I just turned my back for a minute to hang up laundry. When I looked again, she was gone. Carol and I ran to the creek behind the house. The water was only knee-deep, but it moved fast over slippery rocks. An 8-year-old girl could easily fall in and get swept downstream. "Sarah," I called. "Sarah, can you hear me?" No answer. But then Carol grabbed my arm. "Look," she whispered. There in the mud by the creek were those massive footprints, and next to them, small sneaker prints, Sarah's shoes. The tracks showed the creature had knelt down by the water's edge. "Follow them," I said, checking my rifle. The trail led upstream, into the thick forest. The creature's stride was longer now, like it was carrying something. Every few yards we found broken twigs at about 8 feet high, head level for whatever we were tracking. "It's got her," Carol said, her voice tight with worry. We followed the trail for half an hour, moving as fast as we could through the undergrowth. The tracks led toward the old logging camp, but then turned off into an area I'd never explored. The trees grew closer together here, and the canopy blocked out most of the sun. Then we heard it, a child's voice, faint but unmistakable. "Help! Somebody help me!" We ran toward the sound, crashing through bushes and jet, umping over fallen logs. The voice was coming from up ahead, near a cluster of large rocks. "Sarah!" I shouted. "We're coming!" "Ranger Bill!" she called back. "I'm stuck!" We found her, wedged between two big rocks about 10 feet down in a crevice. She was crying, but seemed unharmed. Above her, the rocks were wet and slippery. She must have fallen while trying to cross. But what froze my blood was what she said next. "The big hairy man pulled me out of the water," she said as I lowered a rope to her. "He carried me here and tried to help me get out, but I slipped again. He made a sad noise and ran away when he heard you coming." Carol and I looked at each other. The creature hadn't taken Sarah. It had saved her from drowning in the creek. After we got Sarah safely back to her grandmother, Carol and I returned to study the scene. The tracks told the whole story. Sarah had fallen into the creek and been swept downstream. The creature had pulled her out, then tried to carry her home. But when she slipped into the crevice, it couldn't figure out how to get her out safely. "It was trying to help," Carol said, amazed. "It saved her life." That changed everything. This wasn't a monster hunting children. It was something intelligent, maybe even protective. But it was also something that could kill us both without trying, if it wanted to. Over the next few days, we set up cameras around the creature's territory. We wanted to learn more without getting too close. The photos we got were incredible. The creature was even bigger than we'd thought, at least 8 feet tall and incredibly muscular. But more importantly, we saw that Henry Watts had been right. There were at least 3 of them: a large male, a smaller female, and what looked like a young one. They moved through the forest like ghosts, barely disturbing the undergrowth, but they were watching everything that happened in their territory. When Tom Morrison's tractor broke down, they left tools from the old logging camp by his barn. When a storm knocked a tree across the Hendersons' driveway, they moved, it during the night. They're not just intelligent, Carol said, studying the photos. They're trying to take care of people. But our research caught the wrong kind of attention. 3 weeks into our investigation, a black SUV showed up at the ranger station. 2 men in suits got out, military types by the way they moved. "Rangers," the older one said, flashing credentials too fast to read. "I'm Agent Collins. This is Agent Hayes. We understand you've been investigating reports of an unknown animal in this area." "Just following up on some complaints," I said carefully. Collins smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. "We'd like to see your reports and any evidence you've collected." Carol and I exchanged glances. We'd kept the most important stuff hidden, just in case something like this happened. "Haven't found much," I lied. "Probably just bears." "Bears," Hayes said flatly. "That leave 18-inch humanoid footprints." They knew. Somehow they already knew about the creatures. "We're taking over this investigation," Collins said, "for national security reasons. You'll turn over all your materials and cease any further research." "And if we don't?" Carol asked. Collins's smile got wider and colder. "Let's just say it would be better for everyone if you cooperated." After they left, Carol was furious. "We can't let them capture those creatures, Bill. They're not animals. They're people, just different from us." That night we hiked out to the logging camp to warn them somehow. But when we got there, the buildings were empty. The creatures were gone, like they'd never been there. "They knew," I said, looking around at the abandoned shelter. Somehow they knew the danger was coming. In the distance we heard the sound of helicopters approaching. Collins and his people were already moving in. But in the shadows at the edge of the clearing, I saw a pair of glowing eyes watching us. The creatures hadn't run far. They were still here, still protecting their territory, and they were waiting to see what we would do next. The helicopters came at dawn, 3 of them loaded with soldiers and equipment. From my hiding spot on the ridge above the logging camp, I watched them set up a command post and spread out in search teams. Carol and I had spent the night in the woods trying to figure out how to protect the creatures. "They're using Vietnam-era tactics," I told her as we watched through my field glasses. "Surround and flush out. But these aren't Viet Cong. They don't know they're being hunted." Carol was studying a map of the cave system. "Maybe they do know. Look at this. If they're in the deep caves, the soldiers will never find them. The passages go on for miles." But I wasn't so sure. The creatures had shown they cared about the local families. If soldiers started threatening people, they might come out to protect them. My fears came true around noon. The soldiers had gone door to door, questioning everyone in the area. When they got to Mrs. Henderson's place, they weren't polite about it. Through the trees, we could see them searching her house and yard. Sarah was crying on the porch, while 2 soldiers tore apart her grandmother's garden, looking for evidence. That's when the creature appeared. The big male came out of the forest like a force of nature, standing at the edge of Mrs. Henderson's yard. He was magnificent and terrifying, 9 feet tall, muscles like a bodybuilder, but moving with the grace of a dancer. He looked at the soldiers, threatening the old woman and child, and his lips pulled back to show teeth like a bear's. The soldiers raised their tranquilizer guns, but they were shaking. Facing something like that up close was different from hunting it with helicopters. "Stand down," the creature seemed to say, though the sound that came out was more like controlled thunder. "Leave them alone." One of the soldiers fired a dart. It hit the creature in the shoulder, but he just pulled it out and threw it back at him. Then he roared, a sound that shook leaves from the trees and made my bones vibrate. More soldiers came running, but the creature was already moving. He grabbed a fence post and threw it like a spear, knocking one man's gun from his hands. Then he was gone, vanished back into the forest before they could react. Jesus, Carol breathed. Did you see how fast he moved? Over the radio, we heard Collins coordinating the hunt. Target confirmed. 8 to 9 feet tall, extreme physical capabilities. Use heavy tranquilizers only. We want it alive. That night, the creatures struck back. They'd learned by watching that the soldiers used radios to coordinate. So they started cutting communication lines and disabling equipment. Helicopters developed mysterious engine problems. Vehicles got flat tires from sharp rocks that appeared on the roads. The creatures were fighting a guerrilla war, and they were winning. But Collins wasn't giving up. The next morning, he made an announcement over loudspeakers placed around the forest. Attention, local residents. For your safety, this area is being evacuated. Anyone who refuses to leave will be considered a security threat. He was going to drive out all the people the creatures cared about, then use fire or poison gas to clear the caves. It was exactly what we'd done in Vietnam when we couldn't find the enemy. We have to stop this, Carol said. But how could 2 forest rangers fight the U.S. military? That's when I remembered something my old sergeant used to say. When you're outnumbered, don't fight the army, fight the general. Collins was coordinating everything from his command post at the logging camp. If something happened to him, the operation would fall apart, at least for a while. I'm going in, I told Carol. Alone. That's suicide, Bill. Maybe it was. But I'd sworn an oath to protect the forest and everything in it. That included the creatures. I made my way through the woods after dark using skills I hadn't needed since Vietnam. The soldiers had sentries posted, but they were watching for 9-foot monsters. Not one old ranger who knew how to move quietly. Collins was in the main building, studying maps and talking on a satellite phone. Through the window, I could hear him talking about bringing in flamethrowers if the tranquilizers didn't work. I was about to make my move when something grabbed my shoulder. I spun around and found myself face to face with the big male creature. Up close, he was even more impressive, and more human than I'd expected. His eyes held intelligence and something else. Sadness, maybe. He looked at me for a long moment, then pointed at the building where Collins was. He understood what I was trying to do. Then he handed me something, a grenade from the old logging camp, probably left over from when they used dynamite to clear stumps. It was corroded and might not work, but it was still dangerous. The creature was asking me to help him protect his family. But he was also giving me a choice. I could walk away and let the military handle this, or I could commit treason by helping an unknown enemy. I looked into those intelligent eyes and made my decision. Let's go get the bastard, I whispered. The explosion brought down half the building and sent Collins's men running in all directions. In the chaos, the creatures disappeared back into the deep forest. The military pulled out the next day after Collins got medevaced to a hospital with a concussion and several broken ribs. Officially, the incident was classified as a training accident involving unstable ordnance left over from logging operations. No mention was made of unknown primates or intelligent creatures. The soldiers were reassigned to other duties and ordered never to discuss what they'd seen. Carol and I kept our jobs, but just barely. We were transferred to different districts and warned that any further irregularities in our reports would result in termination. The message was, it was clear, keep quiet or else. But we'd accomplished what we set out to do. The creature families were safe, at least for now. I still work these mountains, 30 years later. I'm an old man now, getting ready to retire. But I still see signs of them sometimes. A tree fallen across a road after a storm, cut clean with some kind of blade. Tools left where a broke-down car needs fixing. Small kindnesses that people attribute to good neighbors. The families around Fern Cove know the truth, of course. They leave food out sometimes, or don't ask too many questions when their problems get solved overnight. It's an understanding that goes back generations. Live and let live. Help when you can. I've seen them a few more times over the years. The young one from 1973 is grown now, with children of his own. They've adapted to the modern world in small ways. I've found plastic containers cleaned and returned after being used for food storage. Once I saw tracks around a broken-down truck that had been fixed with parts that could only have come from a modern garage. They're learning, evolving, becoming something new while staying true to what they are. Carol wrote up everything we discovered before she died 5 years ago. Her research is hidden in a safe deposit box, waiting for a time when the world might be ready to accept that intelligence and dignity aren't limited to humans. Sometimes the monsters are more civilized than we are. I've trained my replacement, a young ranger named Peterson who reminds me of myself 30 years ago. I haven't told him everything yet, but I've shown him enough to make him curious. When he's ready, I'll pass on the real responsibility of this job, protecting something precious that most people aren't ready to understand. The mountains hold secrets. Some of them are dangerous, but some are wonderful. The trick is knowing which is which. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to help keep the wonderful ones safe for another generation. My name is Bill Granger, and this is the story I've never been allowed to tell. Until now, the creatures are still out there, still watching over the families in Fern Cove, still proving that monsters and men aren't so different after all, and that's exactly how it should be. My name is Robert Standing Bear, and I've been a forest ranger for 12 years now. People call me Bobby. I'm 35 years old, half Cherokee, and I work in the Cherokee National Forest in East Tennessee. Most days I love my job. The mountains are beautiful, the work keeps me busy, and I feel like I'm protecting something important. But some days, like today, I wish I'd never heard the stories my grandmother used to tell me. I grew up caught between two worlds. My Cherokee grandmother raised me after my parents died, filling my head with old stories about spirits and shapeshifters. Then I went to college, became a ranger, and tried to forget all that nonsense. The Cherokee folks in town think I sold out to the white world. The other rangers think I'm just another Native American who got lucky with a government job. Neither side really accepts me, and most days that's fine. I do my job, protect the forest, and go home to my quiet cabin. Wildcat Mountain is my territory. It's thick with laurel bushes that grow so dense you can barely see 3 feet ahead. Hidden caves dot the mountainside like secret doors. The Cherokee used to hunt here, back before the government made it a national forest. My grandmother said the Cherokee women had special ceremonies up there, sacred places where they talked to the spirits. She also told me about the Wampus cat. Bobby, she'd say, rocking in her old chair on the porch, there are things in these mountains that don't follow the rules of the white man's world. The Wampus cat is one of them. She was once a Cherokee woman, transformed by dark magic, cursed to walk between the human world and the animal world forever. I used to roll my eyes at those stories. 12 years protecting these mountains, and I never saw anything stranger than a lost hiker or a bear getting into someone's garbage. Until last week. It started with the hunters. 3 of them came into the ranger station, faces white as sheets, talking fast and looking over their shoulders every few seconds. "There's something up on Wildcat Mountain," the oldest one said. His name was Jim Morrison, and I'd known him for years. Good hunter, steady guy, not the type to make up stories. "Something that ain't natural." "What kind of something?" I asked, pulling out my incident report forms. "It looked like..." Jim stopped, shook his head. "You're going to think we're crazy." "Try me." "It looked like a woman, but it was walking on all fours like a cat, a big cat. And when it saw us, it stood up on 2 legs and screamed like nothing I ever heard." The other 2 hunters nodded. One of them, a kid maybe 20 years old, was shaking. "It followed us for 3 miles, the kid whispered, just staying in the trees, watching us. Every time we stopped, we could hear it moving. When we finally made it back to the truck, we saw it one more time. Standing on a rock, looking down at us. It had a woman's face, but what? But it had yellow eyes, like a cat's eyes. And when it smiled, we could see fangs. I wrote it all down, but in my head I was thinking they'd seen a bear, or maybe a mountain lion. Fear and darkness can make your mind play tricks on you. I told them I'd check it out, and they left looking relieved. That night, I called my partner, Jennifer Walsh. Jen's been a ranger for 7 years, and she studied anthropology in college. She loves hearing about Native American stories and legends. "Hey, Jen," I said when she picked up. "Got a weird report today. Some hunters think they saw something strange up on Wildcat Mountain." "What kind of strange?" I told her about the hunters and their story. When I mentioned the creature looked like a woman cat, Jen got quiet. "Bobby," she said finally, "that sounds like a wampus cat." My blood went cold. "What do you know about wampus cats?" "I wrote a paper about them in college, Cherokee legend. A woman who was transformed into a creature that's half human, half cat. She's supposed to be a guardian spirit, protecting sacred places." I didn't sleep much that night. I kept hearing my grandmother's voice telling me old stories I'd tried so hard to forget. The next morning, Jen and I hiked up to Wildcat Mountain. The weather was perfect, sunny, not too hot, with a light breeze moving through the trees. Birds were singing, squirrels were chattering, everything seemed normal. But something felt wrong. "You notice how quiet it got?" Jen asked as we climbed higher up the trail. She was right. The deeper we went into the mountain, the quieter everything became. The birds stopped singing. The squirrels disappeared. Even the wind seemed to die down. "Animals can sense things we can't," I said, but my voice sounded too loud in the silence. We found the hunters' campsite without much trouble. It was a mess. Gear scattered everywhere, tent torn down in a hurry, camp chairs overturned. But what really got my attention were the tracks. "Jesus Christ," Jen whispered, kneeling down next to a clear print in the mud. "Bobby, look at this." The track was huge, bigger than any mountain lion print I'd ever seen. But it was wrong somehow. The pads were like a cat's paws, but the toes were too long, too much like fingers. "This isn't possible," I said. But even as I said it, I was thinking about my grandmother's stories. We followed the tracks deeper into the forest. They led us through thick laurel bushes, around rocks, up steep hills. Whoever or whatever left these tracks moved fast and knew the mountain well. The tracks stopped at a clearing I'd never seen before, even after 12 years working this area. In the center of the clearing was a circle of stones, old ones, covered with moss and worn smooth by rain and time. "This looks like a ceremonial site," Jen said, pulling out her camera. "Cherokee, probably very old." As she took pictures, I walked a row, on the edge of the clearing. That's when I saw them. Claw marks on the trees. Deep gouges in the bark, at least 10 feet off the ground. "Jen," I called. "Come look at this." The claw marks were fresh. 4 parallel lines dug deep into the oak tree with sap still running down like golden blood. "What could make marks that high up?" Jen asked. Before I could answer, we heard it. A sound I'll never forget as long as I live. It started low, like a woman humming, then rose higher and higher until it became a scream that made my teeth hurt. The sound came from all around us, echoing off the trees and rocks. Jen grabbed my arm, her camera forgotten. "We need to leave," she whispered. "Right now." But as we turned to go, I saw movement in the trees across the clearing. Something big, moving through the shadows. Something that walked upright. "Don't look back," I told Jen, but I couldn't help myself. I turned my head just enough to see. It was standing on the edge of the clearing, maybe 50 yards away. At first glance, it looked like a person, tall, dark-haired, wearing what might have been old clothes. But then it dropped down to all fours, and I saw the truth. The body was wrong. Too long, too lean, muscles moving under the skin like a cat's. The face was human, but the eyes reflected the light like an animal's. And when it opened its mouth, I saw fangs. It watched us leave. I could feel its eyes on my back all the way down the mountain. That night I dreamed about my grandmother. In the dream, she was young again, wearing traditional Cherokee clothes, standing in that same clearing we'd found. "The sacred places must be protected, Bobby," she said. "When the people forget their duties, the spirits take action." I woke up in a cold sweat, my grandmother's voice still echoing in my ears. The next morning brought bad news. A logging company had filed papers to clear cut a section of Wildcat Mountain, the same section where we'd found the ceremonial site. 3 days later, the logging crew arrived. Big trucks, chainsaws, bulldozers, everything they needed to strip the mountain bare. I tried to stop them, told them they needed environmental impact studies, mentioned the possibility of Cherokee historical sites. "We got all our permits," the foreman said, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "Been working on this for 2 years. Nothing's going to stop us now." That first day, they cut down maybe 50 trees. The sound of chainsaws echoed across the mountain from dawn to dusk. Every falling tree made me think of my grandmother's stories, of sacred places being destroyed. The second day, things started going wrong. It began with equipment failures, chainsaws that wouldn't start, bulldozers with mysterious engine problems, trucks with flat tires that had no holes in them. "Damnedest thing," one of the workers told me when I checked on them. "It's like the mountain don't want us here." That night, the night watchman saw something moving around the worksite. He said it looked like a person at first, walking upright through the equipment. But when he called out, it dropped down and ran off like an animal. "Probably just a bear," I told him, but I didn't believe it myself. The third day, they found the first body. Tommy Cassell was 19 years old, new to the logging crew, eager to prove himself. They found him near the equipment, but he wasn't just dead. He was arranged, lying on his back, arms crossed over his chest, surrounded by a circle of stones. The medical examiner said he died from massive trauma to the neck and chest, claw marks like he'd been attacked by a large animal. But the positioning of the body, the careful arrangement of the stones, that wasn't animal behavior. "We're shutting down until the police figure out what happened," the foreman announced. But that night, Jen and I were called back to the mountain. 2 more workers were dead. We found them at the edge of the sacred clearing, the one Jen had photographed. Like Tommy, they were positioned carefully, respectfully. But unlike Tommy, these men had been killed while trying to run. The trail of blood and torn earth told the story. Something had chased them through the forest before bringing them back to this place. "This is a message," Jen said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone, or something, is protecting this area." As she spoke, I heard that sound again, the low humming that turned into a scream. But this time, it sounded different. This time, it sounded sad. I looked across the clearing and saw her again. The creature, the wampus cat. She stood upright, watching us, and in the moonlight I could see her face clearly for the first time. My heart nearly stopped. It was my grandmother's face. "Bobby?" Jen grabbed my arm. "Bobby, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," I whispered. "Something worse." The creature, my grandmother, tilted her head like she was listening. Then she spoke, her voice carrying across the clearing like wind through leaves. "They destroy sacred places." Each word came slowly, like she was remembering how to speak. Her voice was my grandmother's voice, but changed, rougher, with an animal growl underneath. "They must stop." Then she was gone, melting back into the shadows like she'd never been there at all. That night, I told Jen everything. About my grandmother's stories, about the creature's face, about the Cherokee legends of shapeshifters and guardian spirits. "You think your grandmother became a wampus cat?" Jen asked. "I think she's been protecting these mountains since she died 5 years ago," I said. "And now the logging company is threatening the one place she can't let them destroy." The next day brought more deaths. 3 hunters who'd come up the mountain despite the warnings. The logging company hired them to track down what was killing their workers. We found the hunters in the same clearing, arranged in the same respectful way. But this time, there was something else, a message written in Cherokee, symbols scratched into the dirt with claws. Jen took pictures while I translated. The message was simple: stop now or all will die. The logging company brought in more hunters. Professional trackers, men with high-powered rifles and night vision equipment. They set up a camp at the base of the mountain and made it clear they weren't leaving until they'd killed whatever was stalking their workers. I tried to warn them, told them they were dealing with something supernatural, something that couldn't be killed with bullets. They laughed at me. "Just another tree hugger trying to save the forest," one of them said. "We've dealt with problem animals before." That night, I hiked up to the sacred clearing alone. I needed to see her again, needed to understand what was happening. She was waiting for me. In the moonlight, she looked more human than before. Still tall, still lean and muscled like a cat, but her face was definitely my grandmother's. She wore the same expression she used to have when I was little and had done something wrong, disappointed but loving. "Grandmother?" I said in Cherokee, the language she'd taught me as a child. She smiled, showing those terrible fangs. "Hello, Bobby." "Why?" I asked. "Why did you become this?" She sat down on one of the stones, her movements graceful despite her size. "When I died, I saw what was coming. The destruction of everything sacred. The last Cherokee women's ceremonial site, destroyed for profit. I couldn't allow it. But the curse was my choice." Her eyes glowed in the darkness. "Cherokee women have always protected what matters most. When the men forgot their duties, when the young ones left for the white man's world, someone had to remain." I felt tears running down my face. "I'm sorry. I should have stayed, should have learned the old ways, should have protected these places myself." "You still can." She stood up, towering over me. "The curse can be broken, but only if another member of the family takes responsibility for guarding the sacred sites. What would happen to you?" "I would be free to join the ancestors, but the sites would still need a protector." Before I could answer, we heard voices in the forest. The hunters had found the clearing. "There," one of them shouted. "I see it." Gunshots exploded through the night. Bullets whined past my ears, thudded into trees. My grandmother roared, a sound that shook leaves from the branches, and leaped toward the hunters. What followed was a nightmare. She moved like liquid shadow, faster than anything human should be able to move. The hunters' bullets passed right through her, leaving holes in the trees behind. One by one, she took them down, not killing them but breaking their weapons, destroying their equipment, sending them running in terror, all except one. The last hunter was young, maybe 25, and he'd brought something the others hadn't: blessed bullets, silver crosses, things meant to hurt supernatural creatures. When he shot her, she screamed and fell. "No!" I ran toward her, but the hunter pointed his rifle at me. "Stay back. I know what this thing is now. It's a wampus cat. Cherokee legend says they can be killed, but only with blessed silver." My grandmother was on her hands and knees, blood seeping from a wound in her shoulder. The hunter raised his rifle for the killing shot. That's when I made my choice. I threw myself between them, just as he pulled the trigger. The bullet meant for her hit me instead, burning like fire in my chest. But as it did, something strange happened. The bullet passed through me and struck her anyway. But instead of hurting her, it seemed to free her. The cat-like features began to fade from her face. Her body became more human. The curse was breaking. "The spirits accept your sacrifice," she whispered as I fell. "You have taken responsibility. You are the guardian now." I felt the change beginning even as the bullet wound bled my life away. My senses became sharper. I could smell the fear on the hunter, hear his heartbeat, see clearly in the darkness. And I understood. The curse hadn't been broken, it had been passed on. But I also felt something else. Power. The power to protect these mountains forever. The hunter ran. I let him go. My grandmother, now fully human again but fading like mist in the morning sun, touched my face one last time. "Protect them, Bobby. Protect the sacred places. And remember, when humans forget to protect what matters most, the spirits will transform to do it for them." Then she was gone, finally free to join the ancestors. That was 3 months ago. The logging company gave up after the hunter's report hit the local newspapers. Supernatural entity protects Cherokee sacred sites made headlines across the state. Environmental groups and the Cherokee Nation filed legal challenges. Within a month, Wildcat Mountain was officially designated a protected sacred site under federal religious freedom laws. I recovered from the gunshot wound faster than any doctor expected. Jen thinks it's because I'm young and strong. She doesn't know about the changes I can feel inside me, the way my senses have sharpened, the way I can move through the forest without making a sound. I still work as a forest ranger during the day, but at night I patrol the mountains, keeping watch over all the Cherokee sacred sites in the area. I've learned to control the transformation, to shift between human and something else when I need to. Other Cherokee people have started coming to me for guidance. Word has spread about what happened on Wildcat Mountain, about the ranger who saved their sacred places. I've begun teaching them about the old ways, the traditional methods of protecting what matters most. Jen suspects something has changed about me, but she's never asked directly. She's become the official Cherokee Nation liaison for the Forest Service, documenting what she calls spiritual guardianship systems. Her reports have helped protect other sacred sites across the Appalachian Mountains. Sometimes, late at night when I'm patrolling the ridgelines, I see other creatures moving through the shadows. Cherokee spirits that have awakened to help protect their ancestral lands. We work together now, a network of guardians watching over the mountains. The federal government has officially recognized that some places require special protection methods. They don't ask too many questions about how these sites stay safe. And I don't volunteer information. Last week, a delegation from the United Nations came to study our sacred site protection program. They want to use it as a model for indigenous rights around the world. I showed them around during the day, told them about legal challenges and environmental protections. I didn't mention the things that hunt in the darkness, the spirits that wake when sacred places are threatened. Some truths are too dangerous for the modern world to understand, but I know the truth now, the one my grandmother tried to teach me all those years ago. When humans forget their responsibilities to the sacred, when they choose progress over protection, when they abandon the old ways for new ones, the spirits will take action. They will transform to do what must be done. And sometimes, if you're lucky or cursed enough, they'll transform you too. My name is Robert Standing Bear. I'm 35 years old, a forest ranger, and a Cherokee guardian spirit. I protect what cannot protect itself, and I watch over the places where the veil between worlds grows thin. And when developers come with their plans and permits, when they think they can destroy what has been sacred for thousands of years, they learn the hard way that some places have their own defenders. Some place, bite back.